My mind is set, my grind is set, my heart on ice cold. I'm only here to even a score. Whoa. My mind is set, my grind is set, my heart on ice cold. We down right now, but did it before. Whoa. See from here we gon' up. Made the call, I shown up. Now the game is sewn up. Say my name is blown up. We up, 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 we up. See from here we gon' up. Made the call, I shown up. Now the game is sewn up. Say my name is blown up. We up, 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 we up.
What up, Night Nation, and welcome to episode number 75 of the Knighted Ones. Yes, that's 75. As a reminder, we are the only podcast that features a former UCF national champion, a former UCF radio host, an ESPN analyst and hoops player, an infamous rapper, our resident influencer and IG star, shooting the breeze, talking UCF sports. Remember to like and follow us on YouTube, IG, and check out the Twitter, and check out the 70-plus teams and conferences on the College Huddle, of which we are a part. This week, we don't have Rich Wallace again, but it was great that we had him for last week's show. If you didn't catch that interview, catch it. He gave us 49 minutes of his time, and it was great. This week, we're going to talk a little bit UCF Media Day. Football had a lot of conversations and interviews this week with Scott Frost, with KZ, with Alex Grinch, with a bunch of different people. We're going to talk a little bit about the new playoff stuff that's coming down the pipeline, the Big 12 and the Big 12, the ACC, both with 2 automatic bids, and SEC and Big 10 with 4 automatic bids in the 16-team playoff. We're going to talk a little hoops with Ben. Hard times in UCF land going on right now, and it's going to be interesting to see what Ben's perspective on that is. UCF baseball gets a sweep, and we'll talk about the other sports that Alan does not talk about. Before we get all that started, let's go ahead and bring the man, Nobra, to the stage.
Hey,
Welcome
now.
to the stage, Nobra. Hey now. You know what we've been missing? We've been missing the patented hair flip. I haven't seen it in a while. I need to see it. Let's see it. Patented hair flip. All right, there it is. All right. Thank you, Nober, for joining us this week. It was a mess last week without you. We appreciate your work as always. All right, next to the stage, the only 7-footer in UCF podcasting, Ben Stout. Welcome to the stage, my friend.
What's up? What's up? Good to be back with you guys. It's been a few weeks. I've had a lot going on, but I'm glad to be back on the podcast and talking about UCF sports.
Yeah. So I guess, does that mean we get to blame you for not being on the podcast as to why the UCF basketball team has been so great the last few weeks?
Oh, I'm not quite sure about that. I don't know if I'm necessarily to blame, but it's been a rough few weeks, that's for sure.
Yeah, you're 100% right. As always, we blame Josh Lazar, who is not here this week. So last but not least, but never last, Trey Neal is back on the show. Trey Neal, what's up, man? It's been a hot minute.
Gentlemen, what's up? Yeah, I haven't seen y'all in probably almost a month, close to it.
I know. It's almost like it's almost like you're not even on the show anymore. I don't know what.
Well, I was on a couple of weeks ago with Alan. It was just me and Alan knocking it out.
I know.
That's true. I haven't. Yeah, we're all sporadic now. I think we might be a football show if that's the case. I think that's what's going on.
Hey, it's baseball season, Trey.
Yeah.
Right.
What happened? What happened to the Elite Eight team that you were telling us about all season long?
Listen,
Great question, Roger.
Once we get to the tournament, that's when it matters, right? Because at this point, we just got to get to the tournament and make some magic. That's what we need. Magic.
Bro, we'll be fighting to get to 500 this season at this rate. We'll talk a little bit later about that. And I'm really interested to see like Ben Stout's take on that. Let's be real. Some seats are warming up, and I don't know. How much of that is on the players? Ben's got his thoughts on that that I'd like him to share. How much of that's on Johnny Dawkins, and where do we go from here as a basketball school, as Trey likes to call it? But first, before we get started there, let's talk a little football. So UCF had its media days, like the first real time that we've seen Scott Frost, other than, his appearance in front of the big donors. First
press conference.
first press conference for the rest of us. Scott echoed a lot of what he talked about and how difficult it was to put together a staff in that short period of time that he had, because when he came in, he didn't have a staff. He talked a lot about his recruiting and what his goals were with recruiting, which are a little bit different than what Gus's have been. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then he talked a lot about what it was like to come back and how he really didn't want to leave UCF. And I think, we all heard the story about Mark Daniels in the golf cart with Scott Frost before he left, and he was crying on the golf cart and all that stuff. And we all said, well, you're crying all the way to Nebraska, right? Well, it turns out Scott shared a little bit of that story, and he's really upset with Nebraska and specifically the AD. He took some pot shots at their AD after Bill Moose left. The next AD that came in, I guess they didn't get along so well and wasn't supportive. And he was talking about how Terry Mahajer was very supportive, which is a good thing. But let's talk. Did you guys catch his interview?
I caught a little bit of his interview in front of the media as a whole, but I have seen, I saw a little bit with Mark Daniels, but then also on the radio as well. He did about 30 minutes with Mark Daniels and Mike Bianchi on the radio shows, on their radio show, The Bridge. So I listened to that interview as well. And so, yeah, there's a few different nuggets in there that I had heard. I hadn't heard much about the previous AD, except for some of the media when Scott Frost first got hired, talking about how, the pressure cooker that, was him coming back to Nebraska was just something that I think just kind of made him sick to the stomach at the time. And he never really felt at ease in Nebraska being back there. I mean, it was more of instead of a homecoming for Scott Frost, it almost seemed like it was he regretted it from the moment he got there almost. Certainly tried to make the best of it, but that's what I had heard.
Well, I'll tell you this. He comes across, when Scott Frost left here, he was an emotional speaker, but he wasn't that great of a speaker. He came back to UCF this time around, and when you listen to him speak, he seems a lot more eloquent, put together, thought out, talks on brand. Certainly different than Josh Heupel was, going 0-1 or 1-0 every week. But the things that I took out of that was number one, we had talked about early on when Scott Frost was announced, making sure that making sure that he had to get or wanted to get other coaches outside of the people that he already knew. We all wanted that, right? We didn't want them to return. And he's been very judicious with that. He also mentioned that he didn't really have the opportunity to do that either, because he didn't have a staff that he could put together because he was so late in the cycle. Tim kind of chimes in on this. He says, Trev Alberts is no saint. Check out what he did to the athletics department when he was AD at University of Nebraska, Omaha. And then he says Nebraska media is getting a daily body cavity search with asbestos gloves. Well, I don't know about that. I'm not going to sign up for the press pass for that. I will tell you that right now. They're not very happy. Scott Frost was not very happy. I think at that point he'd already made a decision that he was going to bring his own guy in. They were middling at that point as well. And, they were always close towards the end there. When the last season and a half, they were always losing by like a field goal or a touchdown or something crazy happened.
Well, yeah, he has some crazy, like his record in one-score games were like the amount of one-score losses he had was like in the double digits for sure while he was in Nebraska. It was just that record had to be a tough one for Scott to just swallow. That's for sure.
Especially,
go ahead, Trey.
Especially when you come from like the years at UCF where it was like we were amazing in those close games.
Yeah, right.
Like it, and I always say like it's variance. It's like you're amazing one year and then the next year you're going to be horrible. But it's tough to lose close game. Like sometimes that's worse than losing. Getting blown out. Surprisingly, because those blowout games, you're like, okay, we couldn't do anything right. We're either super outmatched. Some things like that. But it's those close games, especially a lot of them. Just remembering they were winning in the fourth.
Right.
Or they'd be driving to win and then they just don't finish, which that's everything he preached. I was there at UCF and then the years in Nebraska. That's what he's always preached. It's, no fear of failure and finishing everything you do. So, that hurts when essentially you can't do it ever, it seems like. So.
And we saw it this past year at UCF, our past couple of seasons at UCF. And what happens is like, when you go through what you went through in the 2017 season, Trey, and then those guys that were back in the 2013 team or 2014 teams that just won so many close games, like when you win those close games, you're in those moments and you feel like there's no way I'm not coming out victorious in this moment because we've done it so many times before, but B, I have so much confidence in the person next to me that we're going to play for each other and get through this. But the opposite is true when you lose so many of those close games in a row is like all that you start to tighten up in those moments, those key moments, and you're not playing loose. As you said, you're not playing you're playing with a fear of failure. And it's just that can really debilitate you as well. So that's something that's, it can work both ways. And unfortunately for us, the last couple of seasons, it's worked in a negative way. And it seems like almost his entire tenure, but certainly his last couple of years there, it really wears on you as a team at Nebraska.
Well, that's what I was going to talk about actually is how that compares. We're talking about that for Scott Frost's experience when he left Nebraska, but in a lot of ways it kind of mirrored what we had with Gustavo, right?
Yeah, right.
Gus lost a lot of games in the fourth quarter. We were leading a lot of games going into the fourth quarter. And at some point, that's just not good enough. Now, one thing that Scott Frost mentioned, we did have a return on the strength and conditioning staff, and this ties into those fourth quarter collapses of someone that, Trey, very well. And I'd love for you to kind of talk about what those workouts looked like because one of the things that Scott mentioned was the players all told him that they were not happy with the strength and conditioning staff. We talked about this last season, that there were rumors going around that, Gus's philosophy and the reason we got Kansas State's strength and conditioning coach under Gustavo, that was very, very good, very well thought of, and certainly someone we were all happy to get. But he would not allow him to push the players. It was Gus's thought process that if guys are only here for a year, right, or they only have the opportunity, or we have to fight for them every year, I'm not going to push them in the weight room. And I think you saw those results in the fourth quarter. What was different now, and Trey, this is where I'd like for you to talk and share with Night Nation, for those folks that forgot, your strength and conditioning coach is now back at UCF as well as strength and conditioning coach. Tell us about what his workouts look like. How is that different than George O'Leary, which was known for putting on and moving a lot of weight? And how did that help you win?
Yeah, I mean,
especially in the fourth.
Yeah, so Coach Duval's back. He actually brought back pretty much everybody. It's Coach Duval, Coach Strop, who he does a lot of the Coach Duval is more of like the trenches guy, the big boys. And Strop is a lot of the speed work. And then they have Beck, Sean Beckton Jr., who was up there with me at Nebraska. And he's there as well. So pretty much they have the whole band back. I don't know all the nuances with the rest of the guys, but the main guys are back. The thing with Coach Duval is you're going to be in such great shape. I mean, from how you work out, it's fast, it's explosive. But even though how you practice, like our practices would be quick. We would be sometimes an hour 15 to hour 30. Like it's not hard, but we're simulating a game and we're simulating that speed. That's going to be the hardest adjustment for these guys. Because with Coach O'Leary, he was very much like the NFL. Like you're going to get your workouts in. You're not going to be like tired working out, but you're going to get a good pump. Like you're going to get a good workout. You're going to feel good and you're going to push yourself.
It was more about building mass, right?
Versus
like,
lean speed, which it takes longer to build like mass, but keep speed. That's just the physics of the body. It's harder to do that at the same time. Coach O'Leary,
it's like weightlifting versus like HIIT or when you're HIIT training or CrossFit, right?
Or like every minute on the minute kind of train. Yeah,
CrossFit, exactly. Like AMRAPs, all that fun stuff.
Exactly. But with Coach O'Leary, with Coach Duval, you're trying to combine all of that at once. You want to build mass because we're playing a sport that is physical. You can't be, some guys can get away with it, but most of the time you need to be a filled out player just at every position because you're running into each other as train wrecks. But you don't want to just put on 20 pounds and then half of it be fat, or just half of it be water because over time you're going to lose it. So you want something sustainable. And Coach Duval is trying to maximize that. And it's hard. I mean, I remember going with Coach O'Leary where, again, he prepared plenty of NFL guys with those workouts. I mean, I used to say I could go to the Army right now and I'm ready. Like, that's how strong we were. But we didn't have the conditioning to perform at that strength. Like, yeah, we could do it for one quarter, but in the fourth quarter, we had no more energy to do our reps. That's what Coach Duval does the best. It's in the fourth quarter, your maximum output, it might not be 100%, but you're at 95% in the fourth quarter, which that's the difference. I mean, you look at a lot of our losses just over the years, and most of the time we fatigued. And not necessarily like we're slumping, but your technique gets bad. You don't have that same juice when you're running. You don't, guys might get caught on when they break away, or they can't catch somebody when they're chasing them. It's those little things that you notice that Coach Duval wants to fix. It's not necessarily about the first quarter, the second quarter, the third quarter. It's, finishing in the fourth. Because, again, that's why we won a lot of games, because I always said I felt we were always the most conditioned team, under Coach Duval. Now, the things go our way, of course, that's what happens. But that Memphis game, we played, I think, on defense, 130 snaps, 140 snaps on defense. Most of us we're tired, but like every rep, we're still giving 95% of what we got, and I think that was from the first year all the way through the offseason into the second year training, into practice, like those things you have.
But that was part of the strategy in Scott Frost's offense, right? Was to run out rep them, right? Because most guys, they're going to run maybe 60 to 80 reps max offensively, right?
That's on the higher end. That's on the higher end.
Yeah, and we're running
100, 110. That's 30 reps that guys are not used to doing. Those are the 30 reps you want to, you want the splash plays. Not every time, but those are the reps you want to win, because that's when you're going to win, so that's the thought process behind it.
And you see the difference in the fourth quarter, right? Because a lot of the times we would start to pull away. Yes, we would score. We could go tit for tat with someone who had a good offense, but they would run out of steam by the middle of the third quarter. And then we would just pull away and put up stupid numbers and stupid yards and a lot of touchdowns, right? We did 63-10 against UConn or, whoever, right?
70-14 against Austin P. Like, those are the games you want to do it. But speaking to like what Coach Frost was saying in the interview, like teams have caught up to that a little bit. Like they've caught up to being conditioned. Some of it is just 10 years ago, the athletes are just better athletes. The guys are bigger, faster, stronger, in better shape. Technology, everything is advancing. So guys are catching up. And I think he ran into some problems at Nebraska because the counter to that was just, we're going to go ultra slow. And that's all the Big Ten is. It's smash mouth,
3 yards in a cloud of dust.
So like that's the counter. And I think Frost has learned a lot. Like, and I think even just being in LA where, the pros it's more of an up-tempo game, but a lot of McVay specifically, he's really good at that kind of managing. Let's go tempo here. Let's, air it out versus let's slow it down. Like, I think, in my opinion, I hope that he learned a lot just from that experience, and plus his Big Ten stuff too.
Yeah, I think he definitely has. That's where I felt like the last couple of seasons, not even the whole Gus tenure, but it almost seemed like, even from somebody like me that's never played football competitively, like, I'm a big football fan and I know what I'm watching on the field. It seemed like it was noticeable at times where you wanted, as a fan at least, and as somebody who watches a lot of football, like, you wanted them to speed up because it seemed like we had the defense on their heels. And that was always where Frost and Hype would just step on the throat and just go. Yeah. And they would just go. It's like, it was when they had the defense on the heels that you knew they were about to get up to the line quick and they were going to go. Yep. And that's where it seemed like where we would. These were few and far between, unfortunately, for the last couple of years. But we'd hit like a big first down, and you want them to run up to the line, or, all right, cool, let's catch them off guard and let's get it in the end zone on this next play, or at least pop another gain. Mm-hmm. And we just never had it.
And then he'd substitute, and then that allows the defense to sub,
which allows the defense to sub. And that was actually something that since we're talking about like the media interviews that I heard Mackenzie, Coach Milton mention in his interview is, he talked about a new, I don't know how new it is, but a fairly new rule. It might be new this year where if you run out of bounds on your own sideline, the defense has a chance to sub now. And so that was
really? I didn't hear that. I didn't.
He mentioned that in his interview. He said that if you now run out of bounds on your own sideline, the defense now has a chance to sub. So I thought that's an advantage of defense now that we didn't, defense didn't have before. And so I think that's all of that is rather interesting, and I think you're right, Trey. I think he has learned a lot over the past, let's call it 7-8 years since he has been here. And he's learned from some pretty key guys, Sean McVay being one of them. But I think he's going to take that into a kind of a hybrid style of what we got used to while we were here, but like take it to the next level, in my opinion, because I think another thing that hurt him at Nebraska is outside of the man Trey Neal, he wasn't able to gather the type of talent that he could get to fit that style of offense. That's the thing. That's one of the things that worked here for him at that time in particular, in the sense that, it's a different level now. It's just a different atmosphere now. But, still, of course, we want to be able to build a fence around the I-4 corridor and take as many of the top talent in this area as possible, or just in Florida in general. But getting those, even at the time where there was a lot of national hype around Scott Frost, getting that type of talent to make their way all the way to Lincoln, Nebraska, I just don't think it was something that, was really possible for him long term. And so that didn't help him either in the moments of trying to get Nebraska to be molded in his image.
So, one of the things that I wanted to ask you, Trey, a big part of the change when it came to the players the first time around with Scott Frost was the nutrition. So Jovan DeWitt, he brought, you guys were joking around on one of the shows, Ben, where you were talking about you guys didn't even have nitros, right? And Trey was like, we were eating nitros all the time, eating pizza.
We had I had meal plan freshman year, and I lived in Lake Claire, and the meal plan's on the other end of campus. I never went there. Like, I was eating McDonald's my whole freshman year.
Well, you needed it. You weighed like 115 pounds at 7'1", so you kind of needed to put a little bit of weight on.
But yeah, so way less than I should have been.
But so that being said, like, Jovan DeWitt's not coming back. However, we now have the Garvey Nutrition Center, and a big part of feeding it's not only working it out, but feeding it the right way. So do you feel like we have at the Garvey Nutrition Center, now that we've got plans that are made for individual athletes, kind of like the big boys do, right? Like that's what Auburn does. That's what Alabama does. That's what everybody does. Yeah. Right. So do you think they're going to be specific enough to be able to feed those those players to be able to compete and in the weight room the way that they want them to? Because Scott said, hey, they love it. They're pushing. Nobody's late. Before we were seeing those snapshots of the board from some of the players where they were kind of trying to push people because they were showing, hey, this person didn't show up for their weight room, time. He said these players told him that's something we were missing and something we want. Do you think that they have the support that they need to have that type of program to feed Zach Duvall's weight program with the Garvey Nutrition Center and the resources they have now?
Yeah, I mean, I walked into the Garvey and I was like, dude, if we would have had this, like, it would have been night and day.
Did you get to eat there? Did you just tour it? Or did they feed you?
We got to eat there one of the times before the games.
What'd you have?
I forget now.
Oh, come on. You had a steak and I
was just in the hall,
mashed potatoes.
Because that's where we had not a weight room, but we had like a nutrition little area there before, but we never really maximize it. They completely made that place like, this is what a Division I football team and a Division I program, this is how they should feed their athletes. Like, on meal plans if they need to. If not, they have access to every type, whether it's steak, fish, chicken. I remember even thinking when it first came out, Jordan Johnson, who he's there now as a analyst.
The vegan stuff.
Like, and this is an offensive lineman who he can't be 250 pounds playing whole line. Like, he has to maintain 300 pounds.
That man's eating a lot of tofu. I'm just saying.
Lot, yeah. But like, just the flexibility and the versatility is huge, because you can truly gain the weight correctly. That's the hardest part, is you work out the correct way, you lift the right way, you run the right way, and then you go eat McDonald's. Nothing against McDonald's. Everybody likes it.
It was awful. That was my life in college.
Yeah, but like,
dude, how many Big Macs did you eat? You're 7'1". Like, how many 2-for-2s were you buying when you were at McDonald's?
Saying. It's like that's just what I'm saying. It's like we lived off fast food, man. Like, the differences in 2000, like, difference from now and in the early 2000s is just insane. I mean, I mean, think about it. Like, just to give you an example, like, I don't know what the basketball pregame meal is now, but like, we literally switch between Fazoli's and Boston Market as a team. I'm not lying. Like, as a team.
Did you get unlimited breadsticks?
Oh yeah, like we were doing it up at Fazoli, but like, literally we would either have Fazoli's or Boston Market. Mm-hmm. And then after the game is Domino's, like, in the locker room. Like, those where we would switch back and forth. One time, Coach decided to take us to Golden Corral before the game, and Roberto Moratini and Josh Bonnet almost took down that entire, and myself for that matter, took down the entire buffet. And we never did that again. But seriously, that was our pregame meals. And the things that you're talking about now, Trey, like, that these athletes have access to as far as the nutrition goes, is just phenomenal. I mean, one of the, as you mentioned, Roger, the big boys have done this for a while. I mean, Florida, University of Florida, I know just from people who are around that program and around multiple programs in the country, like, they were one of the first ones to really go all in on athlete nutrition. And since, this is speaking to something that was like about 7 or 8 years ago, but now everyone's kind of caught up to that. But regardless of what level UCF is versus the rest of the country, it's still just, it's an unbelievable level of detail and nutrition that these athletes now have access to, which I think is just fantastic. I mean, it's the fuel that you can put in your body. I mean, even back then it was like, you'd concentrate only on the workout, and it was like hardly any talk about nutrition ever.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the education wasn't even there.
To me, like, even just to tie in basketball, to me, that's what separated LeBron, in my opinion. Like, he was one of the early, like, athletes who truly invested into
Tom Brady.
Part. Oh, Brady too. Well, Brady. Yeah, Brady was
the
nobody
first.
wanted to do what he was doing. Like, he was eating avocado.
No, that man didn't have ice cream for 30 years. Like,
yeah, but like those two guys, like, they were like the standard, which is why they played 23 years, and I think LeBron's going on 22, and he might have slowed down a half a step. Like that. It's because of the recovery and then what they put in their body. I mean, the old
Kobe Bryant is another one. Like,
him too.
Trey, hold on. Here's the thing about LeBron. He got faster as his hairline receded, and then when he put the plugs back in, that's when he slowed down again. I'm just saying, that's what it is.
Yeah, but like, it's that old adage where it's you don't want to put 87 gas in a Lamborghini. I've heard that my whole life, but I'm just like, I'm 12, 13, 14. I can burn this off. But like, it's not necessarily that you can't. It's just you're not maximizing what you just did. That's the thing. That's the thing. Exactly. So I think that's where, just even at UCF, Ben, like, it would be hard to. Our way of eating clean when they first got here was like, instead of getting pizza, it was you get a chicken salad. That's clean, but come on, like, who wants to eat freaking chicken?
It's
salad?
not going to feed your muscle building and things.
Yeah, and you get tired of it. The great thing about here is, again, you have steaks every day. You can get chicken, different ways to cook the chicken. You can get stir fry, like clean stir. Like, it's so many more variables and so much more options. You're not going to get tired of it, and I think that's the difference, even just from what I was doing, because again, we had two options. It was pizza, burgers, which Coach Duval never let us eat that. Not even the skinny guys could eat that. It was chicken salad, and then you double up on chicken. Maybe you get some rice. If you're skinny, you get more rice. If you were trying to cut, no low carbs. So I think that's the biggest thing. Like I said a couple of weeks ago when I was on with Alan, Coach Duval is the guy they spend the most time with. You don't spend as much time with, your coaches. You do, but they're recruiting. They're out recruiting, coaches conventions, whatever they're doing, all that. Now is when you spend all the time with Coach Duval. In the summer, you spend all the time with Coach Duval. In the fall, you spend time with coaches. But during the week, it's a lot of time with Coach Duval in recovery. Like, he is involved in everything. He's involved in how practices run. He's involved in, obviously, the weight training. He's involved in your recovery after practice. He's involved in your recovery, in the training room. It's everywhere. And I think that's why, it's good to hear that those guys are buying in and not being late, because that's the first step. I know we give Gus a lot of flack about play calling. I know I do for sure. But ultimately, the guys have to go out there and make the plays. He's not going to call the perfect play every play. Coach Frost didn't call the perfect play every play. We made a lot of him, we made Coach Frost right a lot of time because we wanted to go make plays. And ultimately, that's what's going to have to happen. The guys on the field are going to have to make plays. It's going to be, we're going to talk about a little bit basketball. The era of college sports has changed because of NIL. The coaches almost
pay for play. Sorry, I don't call it NIL anymore. I call it pay for play.
Pay for play. Okay. The coaches almost has to be able to navigate.
Not the CFP, it's the TFP.
He almost has to navigate, like, if guys aren't performing, how do you go about that? You can't nowadays. You can't just even bench guy. Like, it's hard. It took us 5 weeks before we benched KJ because.
Well, you've got contractual stuff in there. Look at what happened with the FSU's quarterback that came from Oregon State. That was the same thing. They had to play him because of the contract.
Yeah. And it's so much harder to navigate that. Like, ultimately, yes, it's up to the guys to play, but like, we were inspired because of our coach when we played. The way he entrusted in us that he had faith for us to make the play. Like, even if you guys mess up, who cares? It's one play. Like, go out and make another play. That kind of trust you gain, you could have paid us $100 million. We still would have played hard, for Coach Frost because of just the dynamic. And I see a lot of similarities. The more that comes out of guys didn't really like how Gus ran things. Guys didn't really like the accountability. That's what Terry Mohajir said. That's what the players said they wanted. That's kind of like
the players that stayed from the Gustavo era. That was a big thing in Scott Frost's interview. And I think this really dovetails nicely in what he talked about with regard to recruiting and regard to culture, right? So one of the things that Scott talked a lot about was this recruiting cycle, right? Okay. And how he's recruiting, we're not seeing the Gus guys anymore, a bunch of these 4-star blue chip guys. Now, part of that is because we're late in the recruiting cycle.
Yeah, we will, just not this class.
Yeah, exactly. And Scott said that, right? But at the same time, one of the things that both KZ said and Scott Frost is they want to go high school recruiting and they want to get character guys. And what they mean by character guys means you got to have the talent on the field, right?
Yeah.
But I'm going to ask a bunch of questions, right, to make sure that you fit the mold of what I want. Because Scott said when he came into this thing, he didn't even know how much this had all changed. But when he left versus what the environment is now, and he said he spent 2 weeks from 2 straight weeks from when he got up until falling asleep at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And Ashley, his wife, is still back home in Arizona because they're waiting for the kids to finish school before she moves out. So he's able to do this literally just on the recruiting. But the interesting thing to me is we kept hearing about this stuff. The players that stayed all wanted more accountability. They wanted more. They wanted to win.
Yeah.
And so you had some guys that left. Flash left. You heard some other guys that had left, right? But Scott's big thing and KZ's big thing is building a culture to be able to empower the players. And that's what you're talking about there when you're talking about them saying, hey, I remember Coach Chin's talking about, I know that they're going to make mistakes. I don't care if they're going to make mistakes. We're going for turnovers on the ball. And that's to put the ball back in the hands of the offense.
Yep.
That's kind of what we're seeing here. And the big thing is culture. Do you think, Trey, and this is a question for you, Ben, too, because basketball is the same way, right? With the NIL and the ability to transfer every year and no penalties for transferring every year, do you think that the coaching staffs can build a culture around that Scott Frost is talking about that was so pivotal for you guys to pull through a lot of the close games that you did, Trey, right? Mm-hmm. Do you think that they can build that culture that they're looking for, and can they do it through high school like they want to?
I'll let you go, Ben.
Well, I'll say that I think that it's very different between football and basketball, and so I'll try to answer it from both sports, but I'll focus a little bit more on basketball. I think that if you have in football, I think that if you have the magnet guy at QB, in particular QB, I feel like if you've got at that position covered and you've got a guy that that from a player's perspective will other recruits around the country will want to play with, I think that you can kind of have some continuity, and then on top of that, you can kind of build upon that. But I only say that about the QB because I think that's what would attract someone there, and be able to have that extension of the coach and the culture on the field. And I think that where football is the ultimate team game, and there's a lot of people involved in, it's 11 on 11, but it's, we're talking, 50 60, 70 plus people in that locker room. I mean, it's just a lot of people involved. Whereas basketball, and we've talked about this as many different aspects, not just pay for play and not just transfer portal, but where basketball is different from football is that you've only got 5 on the court for your team at any given time. And one player can make such a big difference. But if that one player makes such a big difference for your team and puts up all sorts of stats, there's even if you're a blue blood, there's a chance that player is going to parlay that into going somewhere else for more money because there's no reason why wouldn't you, right?
Yeah.
I think it's harder. I think it's harder to establish continuity of culture in basketball, because you constantly don't have players. Like we talk a lot about the transfer portal in football because there's so many people in it, and you switch out a lot of players on your roster, and there's just a lot of players on your roster when it comes to football. But in basketball, we've even seen this since before the transfer portal was like a big deal, since there was still a penalty to transfer, where you'd have guys like Horn that used to play for Tulsa that went to 5 different schools and then came back to Tulsa for his 6th year. I mean, like you have so much mobility in basketball that like I think it's very difficult on coaches to establish and build a culture because you don't know what type of player you're going to get from year to year. And because you have so much roster turnover, it's hard to establish an identity as a team. Like our identity at UCF under Dawkins for since he's been here, because it's Dawkins' philosophy, has been a defensive team. This year, we completely overhaul our roster, and everybody looks at the talent that we have on our team. We're like, wow, this is amazing. And we're scoring. We got a bunch of scorers for the first time ever. Like we got a bunch of guys that can just put the ball in the hole.
Well,
and at the end of the day, we've, as I've shared a few weeks ago, last time I was on, we never gave up 90 points in regulation. We've done it like 6 times this year. And so it's just a totally different team than we're used to. And when that happens, when you have that complete switch where you get a bunch of offensively talented players that don't buy into the culture of defense, it doesn't work long term. So and some of that's on Dawkins, but he can't go on the court and make them pick up a ball screen the way that he's taught them every single day in practice. He can't make them back off and then step up into the right position for help defense. Like he can't make them do it.
Well, Ben,
they have to consistently do it. So
Ben, and I want to bring that back up in basketball because I watched a 30 for 30 that was really interesting recently that I think is really relevant. But from a football,
that wasn't really a great answer to your question, Roger.
But like from a
culture, it's difficult. I do think it's more difficult in basketball.
Because I do think like football is similar, but it's doable because of it's doable because it's
Trey.
You have to play 3 to 4 years in football.
Lee Hunter got paid $1.87 million transfer within the Big 12. The Texas Tech spent $10 million separately. They were going to spend $5 million. They went out and spent $10 million on 7 players, right? So the question is if you've got that kind of money floating around,
you can't
the key pieces that to build around. How do you build a culture? How do you build your leadership team? How do you how do you do that? Because like let's take quarterback, for example, right? So you mentioned early in that answer, Ben, and this is kind of what I was trying to circle back to. Hey, you've got a quarterback, and yes, that's the most important player on the football field, if not all of sports.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So you So you go all in because you're trying to build around somebody, right? Because players want to go where they can win and go, well, with special talent or whatever. So let's say UCF decides, all right, we're going to spend $2 million on a quarterback. Number one, you don't know if he's going to work out, right? That's been hit or miss. Number two, you spend $2 million. You've got a $12 million NIL budget for everybody, all sports, right? How are you going to be able to attract or spend enough money to attract those other guys to build around those set pieces like Lee Hunter, like Mackenzie Milton if he was here, like any of these other people? Now, Mackenzie Milton was undersized, right? So he wouldn't have been able to command what some of these other guys did at the time until he started playing 2017, right? After 2017, if he was placed in NIL today, you better believe he's going to be getting the offers that Dylan Gabriel did, right?
1,000%.
So the question there is it that much different than basketball? Because I made this comment to you in basketball from a cultural perspective. The basketball culture started degrading when Coach Calipari had his one and dones at Kentucky and kept rotating those guys out. It's no different, and then sending them to the NBA, right? The only advantage he had was what Nick Saban had at Alabama, which was, I'm going to send you to high draft rounds. Yeah. You're not just going to go pro. If you stick around long enough, you do that. And then UCF was a benefit of some of these guys that didn't want to wait because they were constantly bringing in 5-star blue chips, right?
Yep.
So how do you now build? The only way that I can see it in building through high school is not to get those blue chip guys. And it's a balance, and kind of go the Kansas State way and get those 3-star guys that you've done a lot of research that can't command those type of dollars, and you just take more time and then just try to rotate those guys.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. Like, I'm not gonna say it's easy. I think we're at a point in time where you have to start roster, which now they hire guys who are roster like GMs now for college, because you have to evaluate.
We have one.
Florida just did it.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be able to evaluate what position are you willing to break the bank on. How do you want to construct your roster? Because you're going to have holes in the sense that, okay, say we're going to pay $2 million quarterback, spread out $2 million receivers, and the rest of it we're going to fill in. Some positions.
By the way, Gus last year basically paid for our our roster. He put $1 million or $2 million in there, and he paid for our quarterback last year.
Yeah, I mean,
so the guy who went to Waffle House. I mean, if anybody should be portrayed, it should be Gus Malzahn, because Gustavo paid a lot of money to get KJ Jefferson here out of his own pocket, and you saw how KJ treated that.
Yeah, and I'm gonna be honest. I think Mahomes is funding everything going on with. Texas Tech has a lot of money, but I know he has his hand in some of it, as he should, obviously. But because I know he paid for. I mean, there's a pitcher that came from Stanford who won Player of the Year. There's no reasonable reason she should have went to Texas Tech when she could have went to Oklahoma and been another line of the studs they always turn out. But she went to Texas Tech. But yeah, I think you're going to have to, at the spots you can't pay, you have to be really, really good at talent evaluation. Like, you need to get young guys who might, like you said, might be under-recruited.
You got a GOL diamond mine. You got to find, but diamond mining is no longer 2 stars. It's 3 stars now.
It's 3. Yeah, correct. And there's gonna, like, just with how everything is, there's gonna be roster turnover more than, when I was playing, because again, if I'm being honest, if Texas Tech offered me $1.87 million my last year,
I'm not mad at Lee Hunter for taking that. Yeah, he's got a baby girl at home. You go.
How can you? How can you? It's life-changing money.
Correct.
That's
exactly.
way more than he would have gotten in the draft, because he was going to go to the draft.
Yeah, and that's not guaranteed. Like, that's not guaranteed. He was healthy at the time. Like, you go to Texas Tech, you're getting a $1.8 million in your bank account. Everybody's doing that. So we're not, as UCF, in my opinion, and unless we just start churning out these Bill Gates donors, we're not going to be able to compete with that.
Well, we've got some. We've got some.
We're we're gonna
We've
have
got
to be
two
picky and
billionaires
choose.
in our midst right now. Two.
Yeah, we're gonna have to pick and choose how we allocate. Which again, like you said with Coach O'Leary and even Coach Frost, like Adrian Killens is a 2-star, Mackenzie Milton was 2-star, Richie Grant, Tristan Hill. Is it going to be harder to keep those talents once they explode? 1,000%.
Yeah,
But
that's the thing.
It's going to be more expensive.
It'll be more expensive, but to me, if you build the culture organically, it's going to be hard to leave for just anything. 1.8 million. Yeah, I'll leave the culture. I don't care
Is
about that.
Is that through transfers or is that through high school?
To me, it's through both. I think you're going to lean 75, 80% high school because they don't know any better. High school kids are going to come in, do as they're told, work hard, and kind of fall in line. So whatever the culture is that's in place, that's what they're going to follow. So if it's a good culture, great. If it's a bad culture, it's not great, And I think if you can build it, and I think they have the right ingredients now. I mean, just like I said, the first step, guys want accountability. That's hard for, just overall team and showing up on time all the time. I can tell you, our first year with Coach Strop and them, we didn't all show up on time all the time through, mid-February. We had guys that were late because we had developed bad habits. These guys want to be great, and that's the first step.
This is where I was going to draw a parallel between your experience and what these guys are going through right now, right? It was actually encouraging. And here's the parallel, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong. You guys had a lot of talent on your team. You guys lost every single game, and you talked about how empty the stadium was besides me and the dancing girl with the bag on her head.
Yeah.
And so that was fuel for you guys in 2016 and 2017 to do better and to take it seriously and work hard and do those things because you didn't want to be that team again.
Yeah.
Now, all those 4 stars that we just brought in under Gustavo, right, that we kept. So think about Braden Marshall, those kind of guys, right? We brought all those guys in. They saw these transfers come in. They were soft. If these are the same guys that stayed and are telling them we want to work harder because we were embarrassed by our results last year, we don't want to feel like that again. I think if anything, if they're asking that, I think A, that'll make them stick around longer, and B, it might create the core of leadership that you need to be able to create the culture that you guys had, because you guys had the leadership council, you had all those guys that you were bringing to the table, and you guys, those guys came together and they bring things to the team on their own, and there are it's important to have that core group that's leading the guys on the field and makes them feel like they're part of something and like they have a say and that the coaching staff is listening and they're able to be empowered, right? I think if Scott Frost can tap into these guys that are doing this because they're showing right now they want to be here, I think he can create the core leadership if he wins. It won't be this year, but the next year, if he wins, I think that you can create the foundation for the culture that you're looking for in the future and still get those 4-star guys. And I'm interested to hear what you think about that parallel.
I 100% agree with you because the reason you want to be great has to spawn from something. It can't just be, I feel like I want to be great today. Like, there has to be a reason why you want to be great. Whether it's for, whatever reason, whether you want to go play on Sundays, whether you are embarrassed, that was a lot of us. We were just embarrassed that, again, we have a 60,000 seated stadium that probably had 1,000 people, 2,000 people in it. It's embarrassing.
It was 45, 46.
Yeah, okay, around there. Yeah, but like that was embarrassing. And then you get a taste of it, when Coach Frost comes and it's like first Frost. Everybody's back excited how it was,
the spring game.
Yeah, I mean, even
remember that first spring game?
Yeah, it was crazy.
That was the most we'd ever had.
Yeah, and that's they're gonna get that feeling,
which we won't have one this year.
Yeah,
womp womp.
But like those were the things for us that we were motivated by. To me, I see that in them. If that's what they're saying, the one thing I have reserved for is what are they going to do? Because Coach Frost can lead the horse to water. He can lead these guys the right way. He has the formula. Where we took our next step, it wasn't on the football field. It wasn't in practice watching film. We hung out with each other. Yep. I can't tell you how many events, how many things. We had cookouts. We threw parties. We threw a back-to-school party. We threw
Hold on.
Party.
Were you the organizer behind the QB barbecue that we heard about from KZ? No,
I don't know about that one. All I know is I remember they threw a huge barbecue in front of Towers before the season started. And, I mean, everybody was there. And, it was for everybody, too. It wasn't just for athletes, but we were kind of the ones organizing. We were the ones that were entertaining. We were, that was one thing. Then every Thursday, a lot of us would go bowling on Thursday. At Thursday night, it was like $2 to get in. You can bowl as long as you want. We do that. Those little things, in my opinion, that's what got us the culture. Because we're like, the same guys I'm going to war with on Saturday, I hang out with them all week. I know right now, I was talking to Causey, and he was telling me he went up there and saw, he's like, all those guys, they all have cars, great. But after practice he was there the weekend, nobody's coming in on the weekend. We would come just to hang out with each other. Even if we lived off campus, whatever, we would come, hey, we're at the bench, you guys want to watch film? And the thing is, watching film for 30 minutes to an hour parlays into, well, where are you going to go eat? Well, what are you doing tonight? Just those small conversations build team chemistry. But how do you know that when you're on your phone and you're over in Lake Mary and I'm over in Oviedo and I'm down? You can't do that. So,
well, Mackenzie Milton, that talks about off campus too. A lot of guys living off campus, right? Because now they've got checks coming in.
Yeah, but I don't blame them.
Well, and let's talk about this too, though, because Mackenzie Milton in his interview, one of the things he talked about, and was actually kind of candid. He said how they've been focusing on recruiting, right? And they made a few nods to what they've done in Hawaii. We kind of talked about that last week, right? He got that little grin about talked about the Polynesian culture and all that stuff, right? But one of the things that he talked about specifically with his quarterback room, right, was he said that when he was at UCF, he learned from the mistakes that he made as a leader, right? And so, and we all know what that was, right? He took off to Hawaii. Nobody heard from him. He was going to quit the team. All that stuff happened. KZ credits Scott Frost in his conversation for coming back. And he didn't have an easy time of it to win back the team when he came back. Yeah, people, he was persona non grata, right? So you could talk about some of that stuff because it was stuff from the locker room and everything else. But he said part of what worked for them and building that culture was the extra workouts when they're not with them, when learning the playbook to that level. We had, one of the problems we had with a couple of our players, we talked about it during the season, the last couple of seasons, they didn't know our playbook.
Yep. You
could be as athletic as you wanted, but if you can't do that, then you're not going to be as effective. And Mackenzie said, as a quarterback, you've got to know the playbook. You have to know it back and forth. And Mackenzie, when he was on the field, he would do the checks. He got to the point where he was doing the checks. If you watched him, he was orchestrating the offense. He would pull us out of certain offenses when he saw a certain defense and moved us to a different play, etc.
He was the point guard. He's the old school Chris Paul, John.
Well, literally, I mean, this man was throwing across his shoulder, across the field, all the things you're not supposed to be doing. He was the
orchestrator of all of it. Coach Frost entrusted in him and all of his quarterbacks, to be honest. I'm relying on you to make the checks. We're going to grow and develop you into that, but that's going to be your job. So go ahead.
Well, and that's what Mackenzie was saying, right? Is that's what he's trying to foster with the team, right? And so if the quarterbacks are doing that, then that means the rest of the team should follow suit. And you've got guys, oh my gosh, why did I just forget his name? Offensive lineman, vegan.
Jordan Johnson. Yep.
Jordan Johnson. He was one of those leadership guys, right? Mm-hmm. And he's the type of guy you want facilitating that amongst your line, because the line is extremely important.
Yeah.
So you've got Mackenzie Milton there. You've got Jordan Johnson there. You've got a bunch of guys that are doing that. That's what McKenzie was talking about. He made mistakes. He understands the mistakes he made, so he's trying to instill the right way of doing things with this team so that they can lead him. Because he made mention of this. Every single player that we have right now on the roster that's quarterback has had starting snaps in Division I football.
That's huge.
I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah.
It's huge. And I think, it's great for McKenzie to even say that, because, again, like you said, that there was, when he came back, it was a divided locker room. Some people were like, the man's missed most of the summer. How's he going to walk in and play? Like, we've been here since, not even summer. We've been here since early April, and we're talking mid-June. That's 3 months of, like I said, that team building, that camaraderie. We all know how talented McKenzie was. We saw it the moment he stepped foot in Wayne Dench. Like, he was special. But it's hard when, again, we go back to that culture. We had started to foster a culture without him, sadly, because we had to. We didn't know what was going to happen. That was between him, Coach Frost, and whoever else involved.
Did he say anything to anybody besides Coach Frost about what was going on the team?
Not that I don't know if he said it to anybody else. He didn't say anything to me. And the people that I asked, they had no idea. And, I think it's one of those things where I think if he didn't say anything, it was good, because, again, we didn't want, because for like early, we were like, is he going to be here? Is he not? Like, because he was the next in line guy. Justin Holman had just graduated. Nick Patty just graduated. McKenzie had finished out pretty much the year. He was next in line, and we're like, well, if we don't, like, we can't wait, because we're getting into summer. We got to start installing, doing stuff like that. So when he came back, of course, we showed him love, and we loved the kid, but guys were really in the locker room torn between, like, him playing immediately or him earning it, and I think that was that was another, like, pivotal moment for us, because it was hard for some guys to see him just come in and get back reps.
Well, I mean, to kind of put a finer point on that, KZ said himself, there were some things that were said to him in the locker room.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm not going to get all into that, but
he said it himself. He said there were some curse words thrown at him.
Big boy conversations. And I mean, that was where we had all of our heart to hearts, from O'Leary to Frost to even Hype. Like, the locker room is supposed to be, like, when they say it's a sacred spot, it's the reason it's sacred is because that's where we really let everything out. I mean, like you said, there's guys cursing. It's true emotion. It's guys crying that they're pissed, they're upset, fighting. Like, that's just the reality of it. Like, we used to have boxing gloves. Another one. We'd have boxing gloves that we kept. And if anybody had any issues at practice, we never really wanted to fight at practice, because, again, there's so many people out there watching XYZ. Professionalism. We'd come in, we'd make like a huge ring and be like, look, you guys got boxing gloves, put your mouthpieces in, hash it out. And if we ever saw it get leaning one way, we'd pull them away. And, that's how you dealt with it. So that's where we say the locker room's sacred. We didn't let coaches in there.
Right.
And
who was it? Who was it on the team that you did not want to get the boxing gloves on with?
Nobody did not one person wanted to fight Jemias Pittman. Period. I mean, you know that. That. Like, nobody.
Jemias had that dog in him.
Yeah. Pitt was like, let me get this glove up. Pitt, listen, we're not letting you do that, because he was relentless, But yeah, I mean, it was just.
What about Tristan?
Tristan won a few of them. I remember one vividly against him and I forgot the kid's name. He transferred from Oregon. That was more of a funny one, but yeah, I mean, those guys, you never really, any of those D linemen, I'm like, I'm not dealing with any of you guys. Y'all are crazy. Y'all are already pissed off from practice for some reason, and you're about to let all your anger loose for 30 seconds, because they can only last 15 to 30 seconds, and they're gassed, But
I mean, the only way to fight those guys, like, if you got Pitt, you got to bob and weave, man.
Yeah, but the thing is, in the center of the locker room, the whole team would make a ring. So, like, you can't just run away. Like, you're going to get cornered at once, so you better be able to take a lick, But yeah, I think, McKenzie hit it on the head. The culture has to be within. ultimately. The Coach Frost can't foster the culture. And I always said, Coach Frost created the runway for us to take off, but we were the ones that had to take off. We were the ones that had to develop it and build it. And, I know it's harder now because, again, these guys have money. What we related to as college athletes, Mackenzie Milton was the superstar of our team. Mackenzie Milton ate nitros with us. Right. Mackenzie Milton, Shaquem Griffin was, 200, 300, 400,000 followers on Instagram. The ESPN greatest story ever. Shaquem Griffin would sleep at the bench and watch film.
Yeah.
Those are the things that no matter how great in publicity they were, and we understood the hierarchy, like nobody hit Mackenzie, don't do any of that, crazy stuff. But they were just like us, It's hard to do that now. And I think even, with a guy like Tom Brady, they said Tom Brady, even with, how clean he ate, he'd go have beers with his old linemen if they asked him to, Now, they wouldn't ask him to do it every day, but he'd go do that. And I think you have to build that within the team. And that Coach Frost can't do that.
So I'll give you a good example of just from my own experience, because I think I totally agree with you. And I haven't been on the show since we had our 20-year celebration of the 04-05 back-to-back conference championship teams. And it was just a
clap. That's a real clap. I just didn't want to interrupt you.
No, I got you. I appreciate that. And honestly, it was, some guys like Gary Johnson, like Roberto Morantine, Gary lives in Germany. And because that's where he played a lot of his career. And Roberto's from Spain. He hasn't been back in 10 years. I haven't seen him in 10 years. I haven't seen Gary in 20 years. And that group of guys, those two teams, so it was about, let's call it about 17, 18 individuals. It was like we had never, it's like we had seen each other yesterday, when we got together. And we throw around in sports, especially if you play sports at a high level, you throw around the word brotherhood a lot. And guys like, well, all of us, but, guys that get to be a part of a special culture, a special championship team, like Trey and I were lucky enough to be a part of at UCF anyways. We really know the meaning of that word when it comes to college athletics. And I think, and I'll give you an example too, like we talk about transfers. That team in 2003, 2004, the team that won the first of the back-to-back conference champions. I was a redshirt freshman on that team, so I was a freshman the year before, and we had a good team, talented players. We won 20 games that year, I think 21 maybe that year, and but we had players that came in that were junior college transfers that became the culture setters of the team. We had one junior that year, and Josh Bodden, who was absolutely a captain in any sense of the word. Eventually the next year when he was a senior, but we had guys like Dexter Lyons, Marcus Avant, and then Roberto Morantine that came in as juniors my freshman year in 02-03. And the seniors on that team were great guys, but they weren't the culture setters that the guys I just mentioned were. And when those four players, Dexter, Josh, Roberto, Marcus, became seniors the following year, having besides Josh, all of them came in from junior college, so they were transfers the year before, and they came in. And then we added to that. We started a culture a little bit my freshman year, but my redshirt freshman year, my 03-04, those guys were seniors. And then we added to that Gary Johnson, another junior college transfer that came in he hadn't lost a game. He had lost 2 games in his entire high school and junior college career. His entire high school and junior college career, Gary Johnson lost 2 basketball games. So that just shows you how much of a winner that person is. He was the missing piece, in my opinion. He's the best point guard I've ever played with. It's not even close. And he had a great pro career. and led us to back-to-back conference champions. And he was a starting point guard on that team, and he was phenomenal. But that year, we were exactly what Trey described as that 2017 team was. I mean, we hung out with each other all the time. I mean, we were just inseparable off the court.
You were at Liquid Cellar. You were at
I mean, Devaney's too. Yeah, I mean, Devaney's too. I mean, for sure. I mean, we partied together. We hung out together. A couple of the seniors that I mentioned, they did have off-campus houses, and we would hang out. We would go there and hang out, right? Like, I mean, it didn't matter that some of us were off campus and some of us were at Lake Claire at the time. Like, it was a true championship culture. And then the other thing about having somebody who's like a piece like that, I mean, I make no elaboration of my contributions from a statistical perspective or a minutes perspective on these teams. Like, I was a guy at the end of the bench that was a fan favorite that came in when we were in garbage time. But like,
so
my
Ben,
locker was.
Are you saying you were the poo of your basketball team?
Yeah, I was. It was we won Ben back in the day. I was way before that, way before a fan favorite of that guy. And I got to tell you, as much as he gets back in the old UCF arena, you talk to guys like Josh, and you hear about how loud that arena used to be before I got in the game. But in all seriousness, my locker was right next to Gary Johnson, our starting point guard. It may not have been like Dexter was the guy that got most of the publicity because rightfully so. He was an amazing player and an amazing personality. But like Gary Johnson would literally, he would look over to me. Gary Johnson would look over to me at halftime and ask me questions about what I saw on the court. I mean, he had the utmost respect for anybody in the locker room because we all had respect for each other. We all had that trust. Exactly. And we all understood that regardless if you're the starting point guard, making all the plays on the court, or the guy at the end of the bench like I was, like we all have a role to play on this team, and exactly. And it's extremely important. And we didn't quite have. Everybody has egos, but we didn't. But it was the team above everything else. I mean, we won a school record 14 games in a row. 14 games in a row that year. We had 14 wins in a row, and then we lost 2 to the best competition in the conference at that time. We lost 2 straight, and I remember because the second game was at Belmont. I remember like all of us gathering in a hotel room and just screaming at each other for like a good half hour, 45 minutes. Kick the coaches out, players only meeting. Yeah. And these things get blown up. Oh, people talking about players only meetings, but like we had one after we lost at Belmont, and we really had it out with each other. But then it calmed down, and we started talking about serious plan on how we're going to get through the rest of our schedule. And we rattled off 9 out of our last 10 games were wins, and we won the conference, and we went to the NCAA tournament. Like, these are things that like teams with good culture can do. And I know that we're a little bit of story time here, and we might have gotten off topic, but I do hope that the experience of guys that are on our coaching staff now on the football team, can kind of from that experience of the 2017, 2018 teams and even the 2016 team, but in particular the 2017 team for KZ, like hopefully can bring that experience of being one of the leaders on that team, but understanding why he was put in that position that he was, and why he was able to succeed in the way that he was, and that team was able to succeed the way he was. I hope that will be such a huge continuation of Scott Frost and being able to build that culture from those 2 guys in particular, that I hope that will kind of propel UCF to what it was.
But let's be real about that too. I mean, you said it's story time, but like that's part of the great thing about having the two of you on this podcast is that, I know a lot, but I didn't live it with you guys, and you guys are both successful in your own right on successful teams. And that's what we need to emulate. So having the ability to speak to that and what made those teams successful is exactly the point of what we're talking about, whether we're talking about basketball, whether we're talking about football.
Sure.
It's culture, it's people, it's ownership. Ownership of the results. We didn't see that in the past few years. We didn't have a coach who promoted that. But there's a right way and a wrong way to build teams, even in business.
Yeah.
Right. And
without
empowering
trust,
people.
There can't be accountability. You can't have accountability without trust. And
but you can't have empowerment without accountability.
Yes,
And that's the piece of it that's important, whether it comes from your team, which is what you're striving towards, right? Or the leadership plus the team, right? And I think that's the key, because everybody pulls their weight. Everybody has something to contribute, and everybody, even if you've got in business, if you've got, people that are doing their 9 to 5 and they're just doing whatever, they're keeping your standards going, whatever those standards are, right? And you keep trying to push those standards up and move those people along. But you got that other 20% that's above and that's taking the lead, and the culture keepers and all those things that we talked about. That's so important in business and in sports teams and success. And I had my own success. I was part of a European championship team. I played semi-pro basketball. So I can speak to that a little bit too, not at UCF like you guys can. And it's great to have that story time, because you guys are giving us, those of us that watched you do this, the background on what made you successful, because those are the things that we strive for the teams that we have today, and what we want to have moving forward, and why we hired Coach Scott Frost. Yeah. All right.
And last thing I wanted to say, like, Ben pretty much hit it on the head. Like, when you talk about culture, and you said you like the reunion, it was 20 years.
Right.
When we have we haven't seen it. It's been 20 ways a lot sooner than that. But like, when we see the guys that I played with almost 10 years ago, we rarely talk about the games. We rarely talk about the outcome. Like, oh, you remember when we we do it a little bit, but like, it was always glad to see you, blah, blah. You remember when we went out and did this? You remember when you came over and did, like, it's never been about the football. Like, it was never about that. It was, you remember when we died on practice? Like, it was never the glory moments and things like that. Yeah, you talk about it maybe once every blue moon, but it was always the times where people didn't see you. Nobody saw us having the parties. Everybody saw us on Saturdays, having a blast. Nobody saw us, like you said, Ben, ripping each other, having the players only meeting. You guys might have heard about it, but you didn't see it in there. Again, nobody saw, even when Coach Frost left. Nobody, I mean, they kind of have given that little sneak peek now, but guys were boo-hooing, crying when he left. And
they had video of that.
Yeah.
At the time. I remember seeing video of that.
Yeah, but I remember, like, just getting into it, like, guys were like, I don't want to play anymore. If Coach Frost is leaving, I don't want to play. I'm talking about really good key players. They're like, I don't want to play anymore. I'd rather not play football than just watch him leave us like this. And that, like, those are the real moments. And I always say, like, 2017 and 2018 epitomized the culture, because when Coach Frost left, they still rattled off 12 wins because the guys were the culture. It wasn't, it wasn't Coach Frost's culture. Yeah, he fostered it and he helped develop it.
But Coach Hype, what he did that was smart in 2018 is he allowed the guys to continue that. And
I give him so much credit.
He deserves so much credit for
that. Is the hardest thing, in my opinion, any coach has walked into at UCF. To follow Coach Frost.
We talked about it at the time. Andrew, Ben, myself.
To follow him and not impede on the culture, just let the guys do it. I fill in where I need. To me, that's the hardest job, period. Following something, Coach Frost is like the modern day GOAT coach to a lot of fans. He made it exciting. We won a lot, and it was exciting to watch. For Heupel to follow up with that next year and let the guys do it.
Hype's greatest moment was going bone.
I agree. I mean, yeah.
But like he said, let's go bone. I mean,
yeah, like that's the culture part to it.
Yeah, and KZ even mentioned it in his interview, right? He said, loved Coach Frost, and then he said something about like going to FSU for a minute. He wouldn't even say the name. And he talked about Coach Frost quite a bit, right? And then Coach Hype quite a bit, and how much he learned and whatever. And he just was like, yeah, those other guys up there that were blah blah blah.
The other thing about the Let's Go Bone definitely is probably the one he's noticed.
Guys will not remember the games, but the times a guy farted in class or a film study session.
1,000%.
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
That was perfect, Tim. Oh, sorry, Ben. I'm sorry.
The one I'll remember from Coach Hype is the get hyping the crowd up and in the conference championship game. I'll never forget that moment from Josh Heupel is the hyping the crowd up at we're trying to will us to win.
I mean, Frost used to try to fight referees on the sidelines. He had a get back coach that held him during, and that was mostly Chins that would like grab him and hold him back because he was so mad. He was throwing his clipboard and his headset. He turned red and he was yelling at people and punching the air.
I have always said, like, Coach Hype isn't appreciated. Now, I didn't necessarily like, just how everything trended after that, but like he does not get nearly enough credit for how he managed that.
Every single player that played for him loved him. Single
loves him.
UCF player. Like, and you saw what he did at Otis's funeral. I hate to bring that up. You know what I mean? But like when he was at Otis's funeral, who gave the eulogy? It was Josh Heupel. And the eulogy he gave was moving. And when you hear KZ talk about him, like he moved on and he was at Tennessee for 2 years. When you hear him talk about him, Josh Heupel is genuinely a good dude who cares about his players. 100. And at the time that we had him, we were all like, "Oh, we need to get rid of Josh," and he suffered a lot from Frostism, right? Going undefeated to coming in behind him, right? And we were trending down in certain ways, but he still hadn't. He had this hybrid tweaked offense. He wasn't even in control of his defense, right? Literally. So that was Randy Shannon's defense, right? So at the end of the day, and I don't want to go on a retrospective of Josh Heupel, but he was a good coach. He cared about his players. His players played for him. There's a lot of respect there. He continued the culture, and we're taking all of those pieces and mixing them back into UCF football with a lot of guys that came back and said, we want to work harder. We want to be there. We don't want to taste this bad taste in our mouth of losing games in the fourth quarter, and we want to be successful. And if Coach Frost is half of the coach that we've been talking about for the last 45 minutes, right? And who KZ believes in, right? And all these players that came back to coach with him believe in, then he will have success with this team and those players, not this upcoming year, but the following. And that's my hot take.
Those guys that came back, I mean, they could be the starters. They could be the culture starters that we're talking about here. They could be the ones that really bring this to a jumping point.
Yep. I said that 2 weeks ago with Alan. I was like, we forget about that 2016 senior group because they were the ones that they set the tone, but they didn't reap the benefits of winning a lot of games. And I told Alan, I'm like,
well, it was you said it, I don't know how many times. It's that GOL culture, hard-nosed football mixed in with a guy who came in at the right time, who loosened up the straps and encouraged and empowered you guys to be who you were going to be.
And it was a lot of, like I said, it's a lot of rough spots. You see the flash. We saw a lot of flashes year one, but we saw a lot of, this is a first-year coaching team, like this is
a first-year leader at quarterback at KZ towards the end of the year. Insert Maryland game. I was there for that game, right?
Yeah.
So, all right, let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and pivot. All right. I want to talk a little bit of playoff, and then we'll get into hoops because we have a lot to talk about in hoops. So we'll make this one kind of brief. So the playoff committee, we kind of talked about it last week. The Big Ten and the Big and the SEC came together, and they are really pushing the 16-team playoff, right? The bids that they're pushing is 2 for the ACC and the Big 12. So thank goodness FSU and UNC haven't found their way out of that group yet. And then 4 for the SEC and the Big 10. And then 1 for Notre Dame if they're above, I think they're ranked above 14th or 10th or something
14th,
like
yeah,
that.
14th.
14th. And then 1 for the G5, which gives us 8, 10, 12, 13, 14. And then they have 3 at-larges, I think, at 16. So what they're talking about doing is that's obviously going to mess with the championship game. They're leaving that up to the conferences. It looks like the SEC will be getting that 9th in-conference game. Yep. So that puts it on a little more even playing field. And they are going to be creating playing games. So when you think about the Big 12 in a situation like that, it would behoove them to give a bye in the Big 12 championship to the number 1 team, and then have the next 2 play each other for that second spot with the potential to get a third team in to the playoffs. So that's a lot of huge changes. That's a lot of extra money. Remember, the trigger we found out last week was at 14, ESPN doesn't have to pay any more money. At 16, ESPN has to pony up and put an extra couple billion in there that's there to be had.
Wow.
I think that sets up UCF well until the ACC falls apart. So, and that's super important for us because it gives us time to get our act together in football, become the prominent powerhouse that we've always become within 7 to 8 years. So I think this is huge news for UCF. It looks like this summer that's going to be put into place. And I hate to tell FSU and UNC fans because it came out during the week, last week, after we recorded, that while we recorded that day on Monday, that UNC is actively, and they have a code name and everything for it. And if you don't believe that every team in the Big 12, including UCF, is not trying to get or find ways into the SEC and the Big 10, I don't know what to tell you, but they had their code name. UNC is definitely trying to get out. Their strategy was to let Clemson and FSU run their name through the mud, through the court system, and see where it shook out, which is why they signed the extension. But with a 16-team playoff, as much as that drives some of us nuts, it solidifies the Big 12's monetary contract. Yes, it puts the Big 10 and the SEC in the driver's seat, but it solidifies our contract, and it gives UCF an opportunity to build the name brand and kind of keeps things stable for a while. And gives us a little extra cash, because if we're going to have more than one guaranteed playoff spot, guess what? That comes with extra dollars, right? That'll give us some more capital, further separation. And when the ACC inevitably fall apart, which it will, FSU, Clemson, and UNC are leaving.
They're leaving.
They're leaving. It's a done deal, right?
It's a done deal.
It's just a matter of timing and how long ESPN can milk that in the ACC before they shed their weight. That gives UCF time to get their act together in football, be able to compete at a high level, and hopefully have at least one playoff appearance in that time frame. Because ESPN has always bet on UCF back to the Big East days. They always bet on and were proponents of UCF and our potential. We have to put the proof in the pudding, as we've had every single other conference that we've been in and moved up on average every 8 years. If we do that again, UCF will be in prime position to whatever comes next, because I firmly believe there will be something else that comes with that. Do you guys want to add anything to that?
Is this, and just a quick question, is this going to be implemented like as early as next season, or is this in a couple years? When is this happening? The 16 or 14 team playoff?
So they're going to try to ratify it next summer. They're trying to figure out all the details now.
Next summer. So we have one more year of the 12-team playoff.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. This year will be the 12-team playoff. next summer they're going to try to get it in place for the following year
right away. And okay, so and the two things I'll say about it is I love the
which
idea.
makes sense as to why the ACC signed their extension too, by
Sure,
the way.
yeah, 100%. Two things I'll say about it is I love the idea of the regular season champion being the conference champion. I especially with the amount of teams in a conference and you're extending the conference schedule. I love that idea. And I could care less if like certain luck was involved with scheduling or whatever. Like, everybody, especially the Big 12, there's a lot of parity. So I'm totally fine with that. And the main reason why I say that is because I really, really like the idea of a play-in game instead of a conference championship game. With the playoff era being what it is and us being now in a Power 4 conference, the play-in game is much more excitement, and it's not a punishment for the top team in the conference at all. Being in a conference championship game, they automatically make the playoffs, so they don't have to play that extra game of conference championship, and they can be punished like SMU almost was this year, and a few others were.
Well, to your point, Ben, like you don't have that duplicate game where you could then lose it the second time.
That's what I mean. Exactly. Like, yeah, exactly. And I really do like the idea of the play-in game within the conferences, the number 2 and the number 3 team battling it out in the Big 12 in order to make the playoffs. I think that is just a fantastic way to do it, where the conference championship, the top team in the conference doesn't get punished for having a great year and get another game on their schedule for a chance to get knocked out of the playoffs. I just think that's great. The other thing I'll say about it is I hope that, and I think I'm hoping against hope at this point, but I hope they figure out a way to do something about the schedule. I just dragging this out into mid-January or late January at this point, like or even God forbid February. I mean,
well, the NFL's kind of stepped in and filled those slots. That's the problem that college is going to.
Well, that's actually my point, Roger, is that like I don't know, maybe it's just because I didn't care too much about the teams, but like, once the NFL playoffs started, it's like, oh wait, that college football playoffs is still going on. Like it was like that for me at least, and I know that I'm not the only fan that thought that way.
Yep.
And I personally think, why do they need so much time off? Like let's play these games in December. Let's end the college football season by early January as far as the playoff goes. I hope that it leads to that, because I think that would add to this dynamic of like, we don't need to give these teams 4 weeks off and all of a sudden then they play a month later. Like, no, let's start this thing the first week of December and let's go. Like, let's get into the playoff.
I think that's
exciting.
I think the big problem you're going to run into is we've already extended the number of games that guys are playing, right? And so you saw this with the NFL. You saw this with the negotiations with the players. You're going to end up, if you do it that way, you're going to have to extend the number of games, number one, that they play, or lose conference games, which they already said everybody's moving to 9. So you're not going to lose any there, right? So you're asking the players to play more games, and you don't give them time to recover from their injuries, because we've got 2. Think about it. We've got 2 bye weeks. We got one early in this year's schedule, which is like the 3rd week before we play UNC, which is great. That allows us to get ready for UNC, right? And then you've got what I almost flicked you guys off. Sorry, the middle of the season. That's that last bye week.
Sure.
And you think about all the nicks, bumps, bruises, broken ribs, bruised ribs, all those things, shoulders, all that stuff. They kind of need that time to recover. And Trey, you were in the
but do you need 2 weeks though? Do you need 2 weeks?
And listen, I'll tell you what, they're getting paid. It's time. This is.
I mean,
I'm not trying to be like.
Give them a weekend off, but don't give not 2 weeks, not like, more than 2 weeks.
We were doing it again. We were. I don't know the academic side of it right now. I can't speak to it. I'm assuming everything's going to be as normal, but these guys are making.
Let's be real. This isn't academics anymore.
Okay, so again, if we're gonna be real, these guys are minor league athletes. It's time to if you're getting paid X amount and not just UCF, all these big time programs, all these programs hashing out hundreds of thousands of dollars, you have to learn how to take care of your body. You can't just be a regular person anymore. If we weren't even
$140,000 a year middle linebacker, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it's you gotta be able to take care of your body. You gotta get on regimens to do that. You have to invest in that kind of recovery. And I'm not saying put $500,000 because everybody's not making that, but if that means you're getting massages 2 times a week, if you're taking care of, there are things you have to do to last that long in the season, to play that long. I'm with you, Ben. I'm like, by the time January 1 hits, I'm like, when's the NFL? Because everybody's getting ready for the NFL playoffs.
But Trey, let me ask you this. I mean, you played the game. You went undefeated. You played in a year 6 bowl game, right?
Yeah.
How long after the season ends and that championship game is over do you need to rest and recover to have a team that's not impacted, their performance not impacted? Because this is a show, right? That's not impacted by those injuries.
So if it's a serious, and not a serious, but if it's like let's say a hamstring strain, like a good hamstring, I think really to get to full recovery as good as you can, obviously, you need like a week and a half, 2 weeks to get I think after those 2 weeks, I was like, I feel great. Now, the downside is now I have to kind of get back into a little bit of shape.
That's what I'm saying.
So it's a trade-off.
Weekend off is good. 2 weeks in between, the second
the
Saturday you're playing football.
Correct. If I were to have taken 2 weeks off and then practice and played that Saturday, the Saturday would have been sloppy. I can honestly say that. Now, most guys are going to be sloppy-ish. Now, we're still going to be good, but it's not going to be like, wow, you guys just played amazing in the conference championship. What happened? That's what happened is you get 2 weeks off. It's hard to stay focused, let alone at professionals doing it, let alone teenagers who are going to be worried about finals if they're academic guys. I think a week, if you gave everybody a week off after the last game, I think you could come back the next week and start the playoffs, in my opinion.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about losing the 3 or 4 weeks in between.
And especially with the way you were saying, okay, if you win your conference championship, or if you are the best team in your conference, you get a bye. Any smart coach isn't just going to be like, all right, see you guys in 2 weeks. We're not doing anything. Coach Frost would keep us 3 days and be like, all right, you guys have Thursday, Friday off, Saturday, Sunday. That's 4 days. Then Monday we're back at it, and we're gonna hit a little bit hard, and then you don't want to just completely do nothing ever until the offseason, and still you don't even want to do that. So I think a week and a half is perfect. Obviously, you can't do it in the middle of the week. So I would say do 2 weeks, but I would hope the coaches were smart. So, and I'm talking if you won conference. If you won conference, that next week is the play-in game. You're technically off. And then everybody's off that next week. So, you're going to have benefits of winning your conference.
It should be 2 weeks. It should be 2 weeks past the conference championship, right? Because you've got those teams that are going to play that conference championship, and they're going to be a playoff team. So,
but to me, so you're not going to get a bye. But that's what this is where I'm this is what happens when you win your conference. There should be a benefit. You get 2 weeks off. They get one. It's just like in the NFL. If you're the 1 seed, you get a bye week.
It's like winning a playoff.
Everybody else doesn't.
The biggest problem I see with all of this is that ESPN owns approximately 70 bowl games. And those are all played in between the end of the season and New Year's Day. Yeah. So that means those are basically
everything.
Those are going to be completely zero viewership, right? So whether you're talking about it from the business standpoint or whether you're talking about it from the team standpoint, who, the smaller teams that, who we were when we were in the G5 and we were playing in, the Gasparilla Bowl or the whatever XYZ Gas Slayer, whatever bowl, right?
Yep.
Tax Slayer. Bad Boy Mowers, whatever bowl, right? The Bitcoin Bowl, which I'm still mad that I didn't get my
Beef
Bitcoin
O'Brady's
for
Bowl
that.
is
Dude, it was worth 50 grand and it didn't collect my Bitcoin. That kills me.
They were
still.
giving it to us at a discount.
Bro, you
And
should have bought
nobody
them
did.
all. You should have bought them all. All
Roger,
right.
what do I look like? I'm 18, man. I'm like, Coach.
I
I'm just
know. I
take me to the
remember.
mall. Let's freaking go. I'm balling.
Bro, I remember. Hindsight's always 20/20, especially
Yep.
when you get to be 40. All right. That being said, the point is I don't know if they'll be able to do that. But Tim brings in another good point. Imagine if basketball took a month off before the NCAA tournament. Now they got 64 teams, so basketball's hard on you.
They did that. Let's put it that way. It would be awful. It would not be. It would.
Yeah.
Everyone would lose interest.
But
You really
as
would.
someone who played basketball, though, and football, I can tell you this right now. The amount of abuse your body takes playing football doesn't compare.
I'm just saying that
basketball.
do you need a month though? You need
I don't think so.
Well, I mean,
Or
you guys
does
are
it- or
saying
is there-
2 weeks.
Or is
You guys
there
are
a
saying
is
2
there a
weeks.
chance? Well, right now it's at a month, Roger. That's what I'm trying to say. We don't need the 3 weeks, 4 weeks. We need 2 weeks or 1 week. And
And I'm
get
not
after it.
disagreeing with you.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I don't know if it's practical from a financial standpoint because
No, they won't do it financially.
ESPN owns the college football playoff.
Who
And they
cares? 'Cause
own
players are
most
going
of
to
the
opt out
bowls.
anyway. So even the playoff games because
Yeah,
nobody
but it's
cares
still,
about the
they don't have
jersey and-
anybody showing up and their viewership numbers are crap. All they care about is being able to have the TV slots to sell the ad revenue. That's where they make their
And
money.
if you even think, like you're saying, if you even think when you watch those bowl games, half of the commercials are advertising the college football playoff. Like, hey, get ready for the college. Like that's all they're really trying to do is just amp up your people. I know diehard college football fans who legitimately watch these bowl games that nobody cares about just so they can be like, I can't wait for this college football playoff game to come on. Like
Now, see, I was the opposite. I would watch those bowl games, but I wouldn't watch the playoff because of what they did to UCF in 2017 and 2018.
Yeah. But
I didn't start watching the playoffs until we got to P4 status.
Yeah. But see, ESPN, they're like, which one I'd rather deal with? The UCF fans who aren't going to watch us, or I want to make happy everybody else who wants. Like that's like you're saying, that's what they care about. Their end goal is how much money can we make?
It's ad revenue because they are literally. I used to work for Disney and I saw ESPN's balance statements. They were in the red until the playoff.
Yeah, I believe it. Everybody watches it. I mean, shoot, this I didn't even think this playoff was that interesting. And shoot, they smashed records with viewership. Like it's crazy to me. I don't know how they do it. I think it's wizardry, but
wizardry. It's magical. And on that note, let's talk about another magical run that you predicted, Trey, and pivot.
We still have a life.
Let's talk about UCF hoops. All right. You love that transition. All right, go ahead, Ben. I'm going to let you tee off on this. I have not been quiet on my opinions on our direction with our sorry, no, bro. We both were trying to get that pivot in there. But I've not been quiet about my opinions on this, but you brought up some interesting notes about the players versus the coach and Dawkins and what the future should hold. And, is he on is he in the air fryer at this point? Why don't I'm going to let you wax poetic for a minute. I'm going to shut up and listen. And then after that, we'll respond.
What'd you say, Trey?
This is Ben yells at a cloud.
Yeah.
So let me provide the viewers with a little bit of context here, okay, of what Roger's talking about. So what he's really talking about is I went on a rant in our text talk last night and some of the context that I actually didn't even tell the guys in the text talk and our chat there, our group chat. Is I'm sitting there watching the god awful NBA All-Star game last night, if you can call it that, and I'm watching at the time that I just went on this rant. It just happened to sync up with like an Instagram post of Mick Cronin complaining about how his players don't play hard at UCLA, and so it timed up with that. And I'm watching this, and this year, if you don't know, if if you didn't watch it, you didn't miss anything. But I'll tell you that this year, to try to spice things up, they added 4 teams, and they played 3 games essentially to 40. There was a single elimination, little round robin tournament, and because of that, because they have 4 teams, they allowed the rising stars, the first and second year players, to play in this 4-team tournament. So you got a bunch of guys that are first and second year players that didn't make the All-Star team. It's not like Wembanyama, like Wembanyama is like part of the real All-Star team.
Yeah.
But it's got these guys that for the first time, these 8 players, for the first time ever, they get to play on the Sunday court, right? And they don't deserve it because they're not chosen All-Stars. And I'm only providing this for context.
They don't deserve it.
I'm sitting here watching that game, right? And I'm watching these guys that are on the same court as Steph Curry, all these great players, James Harden, Kevin Durant, thank you. Yeah. And they're letting them shoot layups when they turn the ball over. They're not playing defense at all. And I understand that All-Star games aren't defense, but hey, guess what, man? You're a first and second year player that doesn't even deserve to be on that court yet. So why don't you show them that you deserve to be on that court by playing the game? And I just think that that was such a microcosm to me, in my opinion, of that basketball players nowadays, even at the highest level that I just described, they don't have any pride in what's going on. And I think that's my biggest frustration with this UCF hoops team this year, is that one of the things that I would understand if Coach Dawkins, I pretty much think that this is probably going to be last year for Coach Dawkins. And whether I agree with that or not is kind of irrelevant, because TMO's opinion is probably the only one that matters at this point.
Well, it is. I mean, he's not listening to any of us.
And so I just, a thing that frustrates me about this season, and it's very easy for the people who were waiting for this to happen this season and just couldn't wait because they could jump on and say, I was right, Coach Dawkins sucks. I get that. And I get that it might be time to move on. And it is what it is at this point. I just didn't think that this group, with all its talent, would be the team that got Coach Dawkins fired. I didn't think that this group of players, especially the way that we came together in the way we looked in the beginning of the year. I mean, you got to think Texas A&M and Texas Tech, by the way, both those teams are in the top 10 right now, top 10 in the country. We beat them, looked like just as good a team as them in the games that we beat them. But now we've lost 6 straight. We lost. I haven't been on the show since we since the game that we before the game that we played against BYU at home. That was the game I mentioned where we had the reunion. The worst loss of the season was after that. It was losing against Cincinnati at home was just the worst loss of the season. It's not even close, in my opinion.
Is that worse than Kansas? That 50?
No, 100% worse than Kansas. Cincinnati came into our building as a team that averaged less than 70 points a game, and they put up 93 on us, Roger. It's the worst game of the season, and it's not close. And the reason
you realize I was trying to gas you up there to get you going, right?
Oh, and then Keyshawn Hall says after that game in a post-game interview, he says, you know what? And he says it, and I get it, man. I'm not trying to come down on Keyshawn Hall because I don't want to sit here and just use him as an example, because he's not the only. What he said, though, in the post-game interview, it just rubbed me the wrong way. He just kind of says, this is a game that we really wanted to win, but they just seemed to, I guess they just wanted it more. I guess we just didn't care as much as we thought we did. and I get what he's trying to say in that interview. He's not trying, like, he's trying to maybe, say something kind of flippant to maybe motivate the guys around him or whatever that may be. But I just
sounds very much like Larry Bird after he lost that last finals game against the LA Lakers.
I mean, maybe, but I just like it. I think the example, like I used earlier, of it really does gas me up when I see players that don't seem to give it their full effort for a full 40 every single time. And to me, it just feels like at this point, amongst or in the midst of a 6-game losing streak, I just feel like we're not showing the pride in playing basketball for the University of Central Florida that somebody like me and somebody like all the fans that that put a lot of effort into cheering on UCF athletics, in particular, in this case UCF basketball, those that donate like you, Roger, and others like just that donate their time, their energy, but especially their money to this, like, to see the lack of pride in what that means, like what the effort means, like it just really burns me up. And the Colorado game was kind of interesting because we had multiple times, like they closed out the half. Colorado did on like a 9-2 run. They opened up the second half on a 9-3 run. And so that was the game right there. Like it was like the going into halftime and coming out of halftime. But what also happened coming out of halftime is Debo Coleman had 3 straight steals. He had 3 straight steals, and we didn't convert on a single one of those turnovers that we forced.
But Ben, and I was going to add to what your point was, right? The one thing that runs consistent except for one game is we've been averaging 20 to 26% on the 3-point line.
Of the 6-game losing streak, you're saying?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it's been...
Which is abysmal compared... even if we shoot 30 to 32%, we win a lot of those games.
Yeah, the thing that stands out to me about and I agree with you. I for some reason, our 3-point shooting has just completely fallen off the cliff. I think that has a lot to do with Juice, like just kind of fading out. I know obviously he's got some sort of injury that kept him out of the Colorado game. I think he's really faded down the stretch here. And DJ hasn't been as good as we needed him to be, I think, is another thing that we're seeing. But overall, our 3-point shooting just hasn't been good in the second half of the season at all. But
let me dovetail this into what Tim just said, because this is part of our conversation in the text talk. Playing for the portal instead of playing for UCF.
Yes.
So this was your main point in the text thread, right? And
it really is.
And I want to ask you this question. You talked about heart and hustle, right? And what the difference was between the front half of the season and the second half. Sure. Do you think the guys that are playing for us right now have done enough in the first half of the season where they can point to XYZ team that may be willing to pay them that, hey, in the first half of the season, you see what I was? We just all kind of shut it down and use that as an excuse when they're talking to these coaches.
I do. I think, and that's why, like, I don't know any of these players personally, so I'm not going to speak to their work ethic in practice. And I might say some things in the next 5-10 minutes that might be an assumption. And if it is an assumption and one of those players is listening.
Just be like Josh and say allegedly in front of everything 17 times and you'll be good to go.
I'll slightly apologize in advance, but like a guy like Keyshawn Hall, like, I mean, he can look at the Colorado game, for instance, a game that we lost by 13 points on the road, got out rebounded, by
We were down by 1 going into the half.
29 to 52 on the boards. They got 16 offensive rebounds in that game. Guy like Keyshawn Hall can say, wasn't my fault. I had 19 and 9. I had a steal and a block in that game. Only had 1 turnover. I had 19 points in that game. Like the layups that you give up, the missed assignments on defense, not buying into the complete game plan on defense, those things don't show up on the stats. And so that's what frustrates a guy like me, who's a passionate UCF basketball fan. It frustrates a guy like me because the players that are successful on the stat sheets on a losing team are going to get paid at their next stop, and they could care. And there's a chance that they could care less about the results of this stop. And that part I get frustrated with, and I get a little bitter about, because the fan base has not caught up to that concept yet. And I don't want to say that any of this, I don't want to say that you're the head coach for a reason. And you definitely deserve some of the credit when you're having success. And you certainly deserve a lot of the blame when you're not having success. So this 6-game losing streak, a lot of this falls on Dawkins. But knowing the way that he and his coaching staff prepares his team for the games, I guess seeing the lack of execution and effort on the defensive end causes me to be really bitter towards the players and not as much towards Dawkins. That being said, I am waving the white flag after 5-6 years, and I do understand that as far as UCF is concerned, unless there is some sort of miraculous turnaround in the next 6 games, which I don't believe is going to happen, then
I think
it will be time to move on from Dawkins for the sake of changing something for the sake of changing it, basically. Because the fact of the matter is, if you asked me, I could take one player to go to war with on this team, I wouldn't even hesitate, and I would say Mustafa Chiam, and that's it. If you gave me 2 players, I might say Mustafa Chiam, and that's it. Wow,
what about DJ?
So I appreciate DJ. You have heard me wax poetic about how much I, love that he has stayed here the whole time. The thing that I'm missing from DJ during this time is his vocal leadership and him taking more ownership of what's going on with this team. That's the part that maybe I'm missing it. Maybe I'm not understanding it, but there's a Thursday press conference before we make the trip to Colorado, and Mikey Williams is in that press conference. DJ should have been the guy that's speaking for the team at that point. We're in a 5-game losing streak. We can't.
But is that DJ's decision or is that Dawkins's decision?
I don't know. And I think that if DJ is the leader that he needs to be, it can't be Dawkins. If it's Dawkins' decision to hold him out, then he's saying, heck no, I'm going in front of the cameras because I got something to say. But I don't want to put too much on DJ. And I like DJ, and I think that he actually does contribute a lot on the defensive end. He's leading the conference in steals, I believe, still, but he's at least up there, top 5.
No, he's still leading.
Yeah, so he's still leading. So I'm not going to say that he doesn't give the effort. I just where have we seen I don't know, I'm just looking for, we're always going to look for something a little bit more from Darius Johnson, and I just haven't seen it. And And another reason why I think I focus so much on Mustafa, outside of the fact that obviously I'm a big man, he's a big man, and I'm like, I see things that he does on the court that I think are just special. Is that if there's one player that is still in a UCF uniform from this team next season, I just pray that it's Mustafa Chiam, because I don't see how that's ever possible to happen. I don't see how is he going to stay. I don't feel like any of these players are going to be here next year. And maybe that's a good thing. It's not a good thing if Mustafa's gone, but I don't know.
The only way I see Mustafa Chiam still being here if Dawkins isn't. And I hate to say that because Dawkins brought him in. And
I almost feel like it's the opposite, but yeah, I feel like there's
I'll
no
tell you
way
why.
he stays if Dawkins goes, but.
And this is why I want to say that. So I want to make some points and kind of talk about what you just said. So number one, Colorado, the last 3 games before they played UCF scored 59 points. They scored 76 against us.
Yeah.
Rebounding and defense are all effort. Hustle and effort. If you watch, and I mentioned this earlier, but I watched the 30 for 30 recently on the Celtics versus Lakers, that whole series, right? What made the Celtics so good was the extra pass on the offense, right? Same way with Magic Johnson. He was pass first until Kareem Abdul-Jabbar started slowing down, and Pat Riley said to him, you need to take over the offense, right?
Yeah, you're literally talking about 2 of the best passers of all time. But yes, Magic Johnson and Larry Bird.
My point with that is, though, right? Not only them facilitating, but the rest of their teammates made the extra pass. So, yeah, they made the initial pass. And, yes, you had behind the back, no-look passes and stuff Larry Bird was doing, Magic Johnson, but more so Larry Bird, right? But all of their teammates made the extra pass, and you were missing that in this team. Now, I don't know if that is a byproduct of the fact that, hey, these guys haven't played together too long, or, hey, I'm trying to show out for my NIL contract, or what that is, but we're missing that, right?
I agree.
The second part is, and this is a part that you didn't talk about from our conversation, my contention is if we are in the situation that we are in right now, right, which we all agree that we are, Dawkins has the ability to coach. He has a decent enough system. He's obviously attracted good players. However, he does not have the ability to compete in this environment of the NCAA. The only way, and I'm going to say this, to your point, where do we go from here? We have a guy who's a multi-billionaire who people kind of gave crap about for kissing players on the cheek. So, hey, by the way, don't make him too mad because he's one of 2 billionaires that we have, right? Who is a St. John's alum, not even a UCF alum, lives in Orlando, wanted Richard Pitino to be our head coach, by the way. That's the guy that can make the difference because he can pay someone like Richard Pitino, and I'm not advocating for him. So, yes, that was a little weird, but, at some points, as long as he isn't going overboard with that, right?
It's pretty overboard to me.
Yeah, hell. But that being said, a guy like that is a guy who can buy a coach. And the only way that we're going to overcome the budget differential, in my opinion, is do what SMU did or what UH did and buy somebody like a Kelvin Sampson. That guy has made the difference for. Hold on.
You got to say and. You got to say and. You got to say and. Why is Rick Pitino successful at St. John's? It's not because he's just there. It's not because they gave him a lot of money.
No, but you can build a team around that name, right? Just like Kelvin Sampson. Hold on.
With what?
A good coach. He's a good coach.
Money.
Yes and no, because NIL budget for St. John's is not even as high as what UCF's is.
Oh, I don't know about that, but okay.
Well, I know that because
Okay.
they publish it, right? So the reason people go to play for Rick Pitino, and they spent a lot of money on Rick Pitino, don't get me wrong, a lot of money, right? My point is, same way with Kelvin Sampson. You spend money on a coach like that because you said, hey, traditionally in the past, it's you build around a player. It's kind of like, what LeBron days did or Kobe did, or, what happened in the NBA when you had the three in Miami, or, even going back to that Celtics team that I was talking about when they brought in Kevin McHale and they had.
Well, in the NBA, you build around players, but really traditionally, actually, up until like 3 years ago or 5 years ago, you go to you get gravitated towards legendary coaches. Problem is, most of the legendary coaches don't even want to be a part of this game anymore, and they're all checking out.
Well, look at Wichita State. What's happened to Wichita State? Now, granted, they had a good reason for firing their head coach that was there, right? He made it to the AAC because he was Tony Knight, or was it Tony Knight? No. Bobby Knight Jr., right?
Yeah.
He had anger issues, right? My point is that you build around a head coach, and in college basketball, you've got to get a good head coach first. Sure. Johnny Dawkins is not that guy that you can build around. And that's why Johnny Dawkins has to go. And I've been saying that for years. I've said he's a good coach.
Pat yourself on the back that you said.
That's not the point.
Getting your wish.
I don't want that.
Oh, you do?
No, I 100% want what we had in the NIT run with the Apple in the student section and Johnny Dawkins basking in the glow of the student section. Or like early parts of this season where he was in the student section and he was screaming and yelling. I've met Johnny Dawkins. I've met his wife. I've hung out with them. I've been to donor events. I know him. Hear me out. He 100% is the guy that I want to be successful at UCF and take us to what Trey said would be the Elite Eight, right?
You still have hope.
You have hope. I don't. But my point is I absolutely want Johnny Dawkins to be that guy. That would be the GOL stories of GOL stories, right? The tough-nosed, hard-nosed guy who's liked by all the NBA people, who everybody respects, who's ever met him. He's well-known within the DMV. Like, I want him to succeed. That's the guy. That's the guy I told you I'd send my son to go play basketball for and to learn how to be a man. He represents everything that is good about UCF, except he's not the guy to compete in the Big 12. I said that before we moved to the Big 12, 2 years before we moved to the Big 12. He just is not going to be that guy. Now, I'm not patting myself on the back. I don't want that to be true. I want us to win. That's why I buy season tickets. It's why I show up to games when I'm in Orlando, because I want us to win and I want him to succeed. That's why I back the basketball team. I want Johnny Dawkins. I want his wife, who's been wonderfully amazing and embraced me when, throughout the years and been a great person, always says hi, wonderful person, right? The one that BJ knows as a head coach. I want him to succeed. I want him to get over the Stanford hump where he was let go because he was quote unquote mediocre and succeed at UCF. He's just not the guy in this era and not in this conference.
I would agree with you, and we'll leave it at that.
I agree with you that the players are a part of that.
I think the players are the issue, and I hope to God that if this is his last ride at UCF, this is his last season at UCF, I hope we get the type of coach that I guess can figure this out a little bit better than Dawkins has over the last year. Because honestly, going into, even a few games into the conference slate this year, I mean, 6 games into the conference slate this year, one of the things that we were talking about when it came to Dawkins was it seemed like and I was mainly talking about roster construction and just what we had seen out of this roster up until that point. But it just seemed like he was able to do more with less. He seemed like he was actually adapting really well to this new era of college basketball, where he found a formula of like he's trying to take these guys that, for lack of a better phrase, came with a little bit of baggage, so they came to UCF because they were less expensive than less expensive than what they would have been. I guess for me, when you start to slide like this, it's you want to see your players take more ownership of it. You want to see them take more pride in the name that's on the front of their uniform,
or at least do it for their coach.
What I really struggle with right now is that I am afraid that we're not going to see those types of players anymore that could give a what about UCF and what this school represents for all of us. It's not about that anymore. And I think that is my bitterness towards the whole situation that's going on with this basketball season. Where it's also coming off, I just talked about how close I am with the teams that I played with. Who are these players that have been at 3 or 4 stops close with? They don't have that. It's so individualized now in a team sport, and I think that's what kind of drives me nuts. It's like
so Ben, to
all
add
these
on to your
players that have scored points are going to get rewarded at their next stop, but where's our reward? We care way more about UCF than they do. And that's what makes me mad.
And so, Ben, to add on to your point, right? I think the only way that you overcome that is to either have a coach that people will rally around and play for, and because I agree with you in the era that we're in, right? And to compete in the, I mean, Oklahoma State just turned over their coach and their entire team, right? The only way that we can do that is to go and buy a big name coach that will hold people accountable. I think Johnny tries to. I think the way that he does it is a lot of what we were talking about with what Coach Frost is looking to do with the football team. I just don't think you can do that in this era of basketball. I think I don't think
accountability is. I don't think it's even possible. It's just unless you're Calvin Sampson or a few others, but it's a small group. I mean, you've heard Penny Hardaway talk about this. He's got a top 20 team right now. You've heard Penny Hardaway talk about how he's not able to even hold his players accountable because they just straight up won't play. That's crazy.
That's my point, though, right? So again, you got to have. I wouldn't advocate for Penny Hardaway to come here.
No, I'm not advocating for that either. I'm just saying that that's a guy that has a top 20 team, and he's still struggling with that.
And that's because of Memphis's budget. It's not because he's.
I know. Again, that's my point, though. Are we going to actually open up the budget for? I don't know.
Well, hopefully that Terry Mohajir said he is. We're going to put more money towards basketball than what we have been, and we're going to be able to because of we're going to be full share members. But my point with that is I think in basketball it's more important to spend big on the coach, and then you will attract the players. And if that coach,
I can see that. I just hope that coach is out there. I don't know who that is.
I don't know yet either. But what I can say is what we're doing right now and falling apart mid-season has become and going on these 5 or 6 game losing streaks and then winning some at the end and then going to the NIT and then
Coach Dawkins' tenure as a head coach. But I know what your point is.
Yeah. So the night UCF, thank you. You can, of course, watch it back for the rest of our random ramblings. But thank you for sticking with us this long. I agree. Overall, there's a lack of inspiration and intrinsic motivation from our guys, both football and basketball. NIL doesn't help with it either. I think football, there is an intrinsic motivation. I don't think the coach wanted to create a culture that promoted that. And so I think that's what the difference is.
Well, I'm going to use my normal one last thing and say that UCF players, if you are listening to this, show some freaking pride in the last 6 games of the regular season, and let's see what you got, because I'm sick of this. I'm a UCF fan. I'm a former player. I'm tired of this. This is enough. Have some pride for yourself, if anything, and show up these next 6 games, and then bring some motivation into the conference tournament. I'm done.
All right. With that, let's talk about a team and pivot again to a team that was a little more successful this weekend, and talk about someone we know very well,
Baseball.
Mr. Rich Wallace and his baseball team, who got the sweep. So I hope you all got the brooms out this weekend. We had over 2,000 some odd fans for the opening night weekend on a Friday night. Again for Saturday night, a little bit less on Sunday. But if you did go and watch this UCF baseball team, a couple of takeaways for me is, if you watched our interview with, and I keep bringing this up, but it was a really good interview with Coach Wallace. This was pre-press day where you're getting the canned responses. We're very lucky because of Ben's relationship with Coach Wallace, and even now we're developing one, and I'm getting to know Rich Wallace a little bit better. He's going to get me a Space U hat that I've been trying to get for years. What I saw out of this team is a depth as far as pitching is concerned that we had a decent bullpen last year. This year's bullpen and starters, I think, are better. I mean, they allowed the depth. There's better depth. There's more movement in the ball when they're pitching. They have more pitches to choose from. And Coach Wallace said this on our show before he said it anywhere else. One of the things that he was looking for in our pitching staff is to give different looks to different teams depending on what they're hitting well. And I think we've got enough variety. We've got some work to do on the lefties, but I think we've got enough variety in the types of pitches that we're able to throw at people that that is really exciting. The other thing that I was excited about is and again, I know it's Sienna, right?
Right.
I get, and the longer you go, like your Friday night starter, the quality is going to go, get worse. But what I was excited about was the fact that the guys started being more strategic with their hitting, right? The first game, and Coach Wallace said this too, but I noticed it, they were jumping early and often on every single pitch. And because of that, they didn't score for what were the first 4 innings.
Yeah, I think it was the 5th inning. They broke it open. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And so the rest of the way you saw our hitting get a lot better. And it was because of that. We saw some pinch hitting from Espinel and some of the guys that Coach Wallace mentioned that he was excited about, that he was starting to sprinkle into the lineup and playing with lineups. One of the things he was very clear about was last year, injuries hurt us. We had Sundin that was injured for most of last season. He was batting well over 300 his first 2 seasons with us. You had guys at third base that we had to switch over to. So he's kind of like what you saw in basketball with what Coach Dawkins said, and playing with different lineups, what you see in football with seeing guys play multiple positions. We're seeing that with the baseball team. And I was very impressed with what I saw, which means that we have depth for the long haul. So, Ben, we've got Mizzou coming up in the midweek, who's a ranked team. What do you think? What did you see out of this baseball team in the first 3 games?
Yeah, I'll echo most of your thoughts. I really was, and I said it on our text talk, like I was impressed with the bullpen in particular. That being said, I mean, Dom Stagliano got a little bit dinged up in the first game. It was just, I think it was just more fluky. I mean, he gave up a home run on the first pitch of the season. That was just wild. Like
For
that's
Dom, for Stags, that's
yeah,
crazy.
I mean, it's very strange. Like, I mean, I think that is going to, when we look back on this season, like even a few weeks from now, we're going to look back on that like first start of the season for Dom Stagliano as being like a fluke. That being said, the pitching, the pitchers out of the bullpen, came in that game on Friday night and just took control. I mean, it was. I think that I don't know if they maybe gave up like a couple hits the rest of the game. Like it was pretty great to see. But then we just kind of broke it open in that fifth inning. I believe it was the fifth inning of that game. One of the things that you didn't mention, Roger, that I also wanted to make sure we talk about is I think defensively, like outside of the pitching, I think defensively we are very much built like Rich wants this team to be. And
second, shortstop, and third were phenomenal.
We got some studs on the field. I mean, we didn't give up an error the entire series. I think that's huge. Like for opening weekend, I think that's a huge thing. But yeah, I mean, guys, what's the shortstop is his name's Jimenez, right? Is that the shortstop?
Yep, Jimenez.
Yeah, Jimenez. He is just an excellent defensive shortstop, but Maduro at third base is a stud as well. We've got some
great hitter too.
Yeah, and he had a couple home runs over the weekend, and then and then Prevesk and everybody else just kind of like
Prevesk just did what he did last year and continued on.
I mean, I just like Sunday comes around and they're just like, we're going to get these guys out of here. Wiley Hartley had a great start on Sunday. We shut him out. And
Khalees was really good.
Yeah, Khalees was really good. In particular on Friday night, I think he was somebody who really got that going. I mean, Lex Bodeker, I think led off that inning to start the thing, and it got all the way around to him because we went through our lineup and our full lineup in that inning and then some.
But let's talk about Lex too, and I'd like to see this continue throughout the rest of the season. Right, sure. Lex was always a home run guy. He was also last season and the season before, he was a strikeout guy. He was trying to crush the ball. If he didn't crush the ball, he was striking out. And I saw a lot more out of him and consistently putting a barrel on a ball to get a hit, whether it was a home run or not. He was being a lot more selective.
And to add to that, I mean, his first two at bats, he did strike out. I mean, he struck out on like 7 pitches in his first two at bats. So it looked like, oh man, but then it shows you the type of like mental fortitude that he has. I mean, he gets back up there in the fifth inning, leads that, and the coaching, of course, and leads off in that fifth inning, I believe, and hits a triple to lead off. It was a triple to start off that inning, if I remember correctly, and then it goes right back around. And I think he hit a double or a single later that inning, so he gets all of a sudden, instead of 2 strikeouts over 2, he's 2 for 2 or 2 for 4, and he's right back in it. So yeah, he had a great weekend. Brandon Khalees, as you mentioned, Braden Khalees.
What did you think of Cruzan?
I think he showed yesterday the type of power that Coach Wallace talked about. I mean, he's definitely got a lot of pop in his bat. I think he's an impressive player.
A sophomore.
Yeah, I mean, he's an exciting player. And then Ross as a leadoff, a lot of speed, good center fielder. I like him I think he's the transfer from Florida State, if I remember correctly. Coach Wallace has seemed to really construct this team. He kind of has shown what he can do with like a full season of time, to really understand how he wants to build this team. Not that he didn't understand how he wants to build it last year, but you're kind of at the mercy of just scrambling to get everything together when you first become, a head coach at a new place. And so I think that this season is really starting to reflect what the type of the type of team he wants to establish here. And these guys showed out against Siena in their first weekend. It's really great to see. And I'm looking forward to the midweek game, but then I'm going to try to get out to the ballpark this weekend to see them in person because, I really want to catch as many games as possible of this team.
Well, shout out to Coach. I did send him an email as well about, obviously giving him some kudos for the success that we had, but also about those gold uniforms. He was right. I was questioning him on those, and they actually looked fire. And he said that what he did was he went back to their gold uniforms and utilized those as a template. So good execution on the gold uniforms. I still don't know about all gold. We went gold tops, white pants. So I don't know. We might be pushing it with the all gold jammies, but
I like the white outline of the black letters on the gold jersey.
Yeah.
That's my favorite part of that jersey. I personally think that black jersey on Friday night was just like, that was awesome. That was like my favorite of the weekend. I really like that black jersey, but yeah, those uniforms are nice. They're for sure nice. And I didn't get a chance to say it except for on our text talk, but obviously I'm super appreciative that Coach Wallace came on. Just the thing that I said on our text talk that I want to say now here is just, it's really cool just how, and I'm not surprised at this because I know him personally, but just how open he was with us in that interview, just how candid and just didn't hold anything back. Yeah, no coach speak, didn't hold anything back. He just you got a really true idea not only about the type of coach that he is, but the type of team that he is building here. And I really appreciated that about him. I mean, it's not something that it's certainly something that we knew about him. But I just really appreciated the way he talked.
Coach Wally is one of us.
Yeah, first. He's the man, dude. And it's like it's still surreal that he's the head coach of, and he used that word a few times, but it's like even for guys like us, these early 2000s guys that played sports at UCF the same time as him and just knew him personally. It's just like, it's so cool. I mean, I knew him I didn't really know him in high school. Like I knew of him and we were kind of around each other, but it was just, it's just pretty cool that one of us is in that head coach spot, and he deserves it. And he's doing a great job, just like we knew he would.
Well, not only that, he's got the pedigree, he's got the want, and UCF fans, you've been asking for a coach. And I'll go back to KZ about this because KZ was very specific about being alumni and wanting to come back here. He said this all along privately, but he said it publicly in his interview. It's the same thing with Coach Wallace. He wanted to be the head baseball coach at UCF. He's got the resume, he's got the ability, and now he's got the team. And he cares as much about UCF baseball and UCF athletics as every single person on this podcast. If you are a fan of UCF sports, and I've said this ad nauseum, he deserves your support. So make sure that you are doing that. We thank him and he let go of some nuggets here that were reported by other outlets, by the way. And we will see if we can get Coach Wallace back on the podcast as well. But as a man, as a fellow alum, as a baseball coach, as a leader of young men, this is a guy you should support. And if you are not, you're doing yourself a disservice. And, that's all I'm going to say about that. But, sure. This team, is a team to get excited about. I think we've got the pitching. We'll see how the hitting rounds out against better competition. We've got Mizzou coming up, who just lost in their tournament. Top rated. I think they were rated number 15 in the country in the tournament. But we have an opportunity. And Coach Wallace, people ask, like, why Why bring in top-rated Mizzou? Because we have the opportunity. They're in state. We have the opportunity to test our guys, so it'll be really, really interesting to see how how we turn out. I'll ask Trey because you've been quiet, and I'm sorry, man. Were you able to watch the games? And if you did, what do you want to give any thoughts on that?
I was watching softball this week, so whenever we start talking softball,
well, you are married to a softball player, so I mean, a UCF softball player. So I don't doubt it. So there was a lot of UCF stuff going on this weekend.
Yep.
All right, let's go ahead and pivot. All right, let's talk a little UCF softball. The ladies have started and have been pretty exciting in their own right. Trey, since we've been jawing everybody's ear about the baseball team, you want to start us off on softball?
Yeah, I mean, softball opened up with some good wins, had some struggle losses, but we have to remember they kept playing a stat that we're losing like 60%, 65 to 75% of our production. Pitching, hitting, because this last class that graduated is probably the best class to come through UCF as just an entirety of a class. I mean, you have Jada Coleman, you had a transfer in Sarah Willis. That was a great pitcher. I think she won pitcher of the year in the conference. Jada, I mean, she's plenty of records. Kennedy Searcy, Shannon Daughtery, clutch players, just all throughout the line. And I know I'm forgetting a few, but just that group was special. Led us to our first region hosting and region win, winning that our region that way. But yeah, so we're a young team. I mean, I think we started 3 or 4 freshmen starting, like true freshmen that are starting, not to go with, 3 or 4 other that are redshirt freshmen. I think we're a young team, but the one thing that I noticed, they're scrappy. They are trying to win.
And we've got some pretty darn good pitching.
And we have some good pitching. And one of the girls that's a pitcher is a true freshman. So, I think it's one of those things where
top-rated pitcher in the country, by the way.
Yeah, she was good. She was really good. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be growing pains. That's a part of it. But it's one of those things where you just know the more games we play, the better they're going to get. And they're young. They made a lot of mistakes against FSU this past week specifically. But, yeah, I think they're going to be a good group. Maybe not immediately, but I think as we get towards the end of the year, it's going to get a lot better. So I'm excited. And, my wife is super excited. So,
yeah. So, here's the thing. Let me run through these for people that aren't paying attention. We beat Quinnipiac, which is fine, or we're going to be playing Quinnipiac. But we beat CSU Bakersfield 10-0 in 5 innings, run ruled them. Played at number 12 Georgia, or versus number 12 Georgia, lost 0-4. Okay, cool. Beat NC State 3-1. Beat Illinois 2-1. Now, what I want you to notice is early on, our hitting wasn't the greatest. Our pitching was really, really good. It started to worry me a little bit. But again, to your point, a lot of young hitters. We changed our hitting coach this year. It's a different hitting coach. People that don't realize that. So it's going to take a minute. Beat Illinois 2-1. Won against James Madison 3-2. Beat Illinois again 4-0. Played number 15 Mizzou in softball, won 6-5 in 8 innings.
Yep.
So that was good because you're playing top quality talent and you beat them in extra innings, which is good. Liberty, that game frustrated the holy heck out of me because we had 2 on in the 5th and should have went ahead, but didn't, and ended up losing 4-5. Played versus number 5 Texas A&M, lost 1-9. Played Auburn, lost 0-1, and that was questionable based on the umping. I have some issues with that. In fact, and then Clemson won against Clemson 6-4 in 8 innings.
Yep.
Remember, softball doesn't play 9 innings like everybody else. So we went extra innings. Clemson had 2 coaches thrown out for that. Tied Ohio State 4-4, and then finished it out with Florida State, number 6 Florida State, and lost 1-8. So again, pitching is typically one of those things that you hang your hat on in the circle when you're playing softball, right? Our hitting has to catch up with the pitching, and that typically takes a little bit longer, especially when you're dealing with a young team.
Yep.
I love the fact that we are at 7-5-1 early on, given the competition that we played and who we lost to and how we lost to them. I hate to say this, I'm not a guy who likes moral victories, but given that this is such a young team, that sets us up for a long time going forward, and the fact that our pitching was as good as it was, I think this is going to make it exciting to watch at the Plex. And they got all new seating in. So for those of you that haven't gone to the Plex to go watch the ladies play, make sure you go watch them play. It's fast. The games are fast.
Yep.
And it's comfortable, and they really appreciate and deserve your support. Coach Bear has been great for UCF softball, and they'll continue to do great things. Okay. That's all I'm going to say about softball. So let's go ahead and pivot. All right. Obviously, we do not have Josh or Alan this week. So we do not have our sometimes funny fact of the week, nor do we have Alan's whatever he calls it. I can't remember because it's not in our notes this week.
Oxymoronic stat of the week?
Oxymoronic stat of the week. There you go. So we're going to go right on to the quick update on other UCF sports that Alan does not watch. But before I start that, I do want to say this. Our very own Josh had a birthday this past weekend. He is the oldest one in the group. I know he doesn't look like the oldest, but he is the oldest one in the group, and he got even older. So congratulations to Josh. Josh is older than the rest of us. I don't catch up to him that extra year until April. But congratulations to Josh. We appreciate you. He's out celebrating actually this evening with friends, which is why he's not here. We appreciate you being here when I'm not and others aren't. He's consistently here. He's a good dude. He's great at what he does. So happy birthday to Josh. Here's to many happy and healthy more. All right. Now I got to give a quick shout out to Nobra. I'm going to throw you up here, Nobra, whether you like it or not. He completed our quick update on other UCF sports that Alan does not watch. Alan did not watch them, and he did not update the notes for them. So Nobra did that for us. Nobra, do you want to run through them, or do you want me to run through them? That's a head shake.
You got it. You got it, Robbie.
All right. Okay. All right. Women's basketball pulls off another win versus Arizona State, 85-76, before taking a 30-point loss to number 14 Kansas State, 97-67. We are next up against Kansas, the Jayhawks tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. and Texas Tech on Saturday at 2 p.m. As we had stated, lots of injuries for the women's basketball team. We weren't expecting much, and folks that came off the roster that we were expecting a lot out of. So there goes Trey. Apparently, he does not watch these either. Baseball, we talked about. Number 20 women's tennis had a double sweep on Valentine's Day, beating Stetson and Air Force 4-0. So not only is it a sweep, but it's also they've defeated them both soundly. And number 21, both of them ranked. Men's tennis finished the ITA Indoor Championship with a win and 2 sweeping losses. Interesting way of putting that, Nobra. Beating number 4 Ohio State 4-2 and losing to number 11 Stanford and number 9 San Diego 0-4. So let me say this about that. This tennis team even before this tournament and beating number 4 Ohio State, which is a huge accomplishment in itself. It was I believe our first top 5 ranked win. This men's tennis team is something to watch. This team is doing really, really well. They've got a lot of talent this year. So please make sure you're paying attention to that. We've already talked about UCF softball, and women's track and field breaks 2 more records at the Tyson Invitational. Ashera Collins smashes her previous best set 2 weeks prior and set a program record for the triple jump at 13.30 meters. The 4x400 relay squad then set another program record, which is saying a lot considering the athletes that have come through here, including Olympic hopefuls, with a time of 3 minutes, 29 seconds, 0.93. Congrats to Tawanzi Johnson, Kia Williams, Jasmine Newberry, and Deja Shaw Huckabee for breaking their previous best at Texas Tech 2 weeks ago. So for those of you who have not been paying attention, women's track and field has had a pretty competitive team year in and year out. Remember someone named Octavia that was here not too long ago that was in the Olympic trials. This
You mean
team,
Renaya?
or Renaya, excuse me. Octavia did too, though. Octavia did too.
Yeah. She was the long jumper, or what was she?
Yeah, I don't remember. Like
But
Renaya was,
yes.
Renaya was
Jones
hurdles.
was the star. Yeah.
So Renaya, Octavia, and there's a few other names that were there that were in the Olympic trials. Unfortunately, Renaya didn't do what we expected her to do in the Olympic trials and did not run her best. That being said, this is a team that historically has had some stellar athletes at UCF, and this team seems to be stacked again. We went through a coaching change a couple years ago, and seems to have found its footing, and it's got some really good athletes. So make sure you're following them as well. All right. That is all I have for this week. 2 hours, 40 minutes, 45 seconds, and 3 of you have managed to stay with us this entire time.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you all so much. There's a lot of you that stayed with us most of the time, but have popped off. I just want to say this. Thank you, everyone who's following us. Make sure you're liking and subscribing and telling your friends. Thank you to Nobra. Last week was another great example of why we appreciate everything that he does. Congratulations to you and your significant other on yet another anniversary. And Ben, thank you. This has been a great show this week. It's great to get perspectives from people who have played, not necessarily at UCF, people that have played at UCF, and just all around talk about the sports that we love. So thank you all for participating. Make sure you're sending in comments. Make sure you're participating in our conversation. That's why we do these things live. Anything else either one of you want to say?
No, man. Well, hopefully we have a good week in Night Nation coming up.
All right. Nobra? As a
Good
current
night,
UCF
and
Sargon, baby. He wants to get out of here.